"You're a burden now," my wife said as her brothers packed my things. "I can't take care of you after your accident." They threw me out while I was still in a wheelchair. 3 months later, when they discovered what I'd been hiding, it was too late. My name's Marcus Hall, and 3 months ago, I became the punchline to the world's cruelest joke. Picture this. I'm 40 feet up on a construction scaffold, personally testing the fall protection harnesses that my startup company designed, manufactured, and was about to ship to construction sites across the Northeast. I'm the CEO, the lead engineer, and apparently the universe's favorite target for cosmic irony. Because guess what happened? The carabiners snapped. Not ours. Thank God for small mercies. But the ancient, rust-crusted anchor point that some genius contractor installed back when people thought asbestos was a gift from heaven. Down I went, through the air like a very unsuccessful superhero, my life flashing before my eyes in a highlight reel that was honestly pretty disappointing. I mean, if you're going to see your life flash by, you'd hope for more exotic vacations and fewer spreadsheets, you know? The fall itself? Over in 3 seconds. The aftermath? Still going strong, like the world's worst subscription service that I never asked for. I woke up in the hospital with more tubes coming out of me than a science experiment, and a neurologist with a name I couldn't pronounce telling me that my T11 and T12 vertebrae had basically decided to retire early. Temporary paralysis from the waist down, he said, with the enthusiasm of someone reading the lunch menu. 6 to 12 months of recovery, he predicted. Physical therapy, determination, positive attitude, all the greatest hits of medical optimism. My wife Claire visited me exactly 3 times during my 2-week hospital stay. I counted. The first time she cried. Actual tears, which I thought was touching until I realized she was calculating our diminished household income in her head while the tears fell. The second visit, she brought practical questions. What's the insurance situation? Are you still on the payroll? Did you sign anything before the accident? Very romantic stuff. By the third visit, she'd upgraded to straight-up pragmatism. We need to talk about living arrangements when you come home. Even in my medication-induced haze, I knew that phrase, "we need to talk about," was never followed by anything good. It's like, no offense, but, or, I'm not racist, but, just a warning label for incoming garbage. But I was optimistic, you know? Stupidly, naively optimistic. I figured we'd been married for 8 years. We'd weathered her father's death, my mother's cancer scare, 3 failed business ventures before my safety gear company finally took off. And that time she accidentally adopted a feral cat that terrorized us for 6 months before we founded a farm to live on. Surely a temporarily paralyzed husband was just another challenge we'd tackle together, right? I imagined us as a team, working through physical therapy appointments, making the house wheelchair accessible, maybe even coming out stronger on the other side. You see this stuff in movies all the time. Adversity bringing couples closer together, love conquering all, triumph of the human spirit, blah blah blah. Reality, as it turns out, doesn't give a damn about movie tropes. The morning after I came home from the hospital, still learning how to navigate doorways in my wheelchair without taking out chunks of drywall, Claire gathered the troops. And by troops, I mean her 2 brothers, Dylan and Bryce, who arrived at our house at 8 in the morning like they had an appointment. Which, I would soon discover, they absolutely did. I was in the living room, trying to figure out how to transfer myself from the wheelchair to the couch without face-planting onto the hardwood floor, when the 3 of them walked in with the kind of unified purpose that made my stomach drop. It was the same energy as a corporate board walking in to fire the CEO, or a pack of velociraptors surrounding their prey. Nature documentary levels of coordinated menace. Claire stood in front of me, arms crossed, wearing her business casual outfit. You know, the one she wore to her bank job when she had to deliver bad news to loan applicants. Dylan and Bryce flanked her like the world's least intimidating bodyguards. Dylan worked in IT and had the posture of a question mark. Bryce was a cryptocurrency consultant, which I'm pretty sure is code for unemployed but owns a lot of hoodies. These were my backup, my support system, my family by marriage. Marcus. Claire started, and I knew immediately from her tone that she'd rehearsed this. It had that artificial smoothness, like a customer service script. We've been talking, and we think it's best if you find somewhere else to live. I actually laughed. Out loud. Couldn't help it. I'm sorry, what? This house has stairs, she continued, gesturing around like I hadn't lived there for 5 years and maybe hadn't noticed the architectural features. You can't get to the bedroom. You can't use the main bathroom. We can't carry you up and down forever. Forever, I repeated. It's been literally one day. I just got home yesterday. Dylan shifted his weight. His classic, I'm uncomfortable but committed to this terrible decision stance. Dude, it's just not practical. Claire needs her space. We need to think about what's realistic here. Realistic. That word. Like my existence had become some kind of logistical problem they needed to solve, preferably by making me someone else's problem. I looked at Claire, really looked at her, searching for any sign of the woman I'd married. The one who'd cried when I proposed at that cheesy Italian restaurant. The one who'd said in sickness and in health, in front of 200 people in an open bar. Where was that Claire? You're a burden now, she said. And there it was, the actual truth, stripped of euphemism and rehearsed speeches. She said it like she was announcing the weather forecast. Cloudy with a chance of emotional devastation. I can't spend the next year, or more, being a caretaker. That's not what I signed up for. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my entire world imploding. Dylan and Bryce wouldn't make eye contact. Cowards. Claire stood there, waiting for me to accept this verdict like a good little evicted husband. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to remind her of every sacrifice I'd made. Working 70-hour weeks to build my company while she complained I wasn't home enough. Taking out a second mortgage to cover her brother's legal fees when Bryce got caught in that misunderstanding with the securities fraud, planning elaborate anniversaries she barely acknowledged. But what would be the point? You can't logic someone into loving you. You can't guilt someone into basic human decency. So instead, I did what I always do when things get unbearable. I cracked jokes in my head. At least label the boxes, fragile husband inside. This side up, dreams and dignity enclosed. Handle with care. Oh wait, too late. Fine. I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady. How long do I have? We were thinking this weekend, Claire said. Dylan and Bryce can help you pack. Of course they could. Of course they were already assigned roles in my eviction. I wondered how long they'd been planning this. Since the accident? Since the hospital? Maybe even before, just waiting for a good enough excuse? This weekend it is, I said, spinning my wheelchair around to face the window so they couldn't see my expression. I'll be out of your way in no time. After all, I'd hate to be a burden. Behind me, I heard them shuffle away, probably relieved I hadn't made more of a scene. Probably congratulating themselves on handling a difficult situation so maturely. And me? I sat there in my wheelchair, looking out at the street where kids were riding bikes and neighbors were mowing lawns and life was continuing like nothing had changed, making a promise to myself. They thought they were throwing out the trash. They had no idea they were discarding a winning lottery ticket. But they'd find out soon enough. If you've never watched two grown men try to pack up your entire life while having the combined organizational skills of a pair of golden retrievers, let me tell you, it's an experience. Dylan and Bryce showed up Saturday morning at 7:30, which was honestly impressive considering neither of them had demonstrated the ability to wake up before noon in the entire time I'd known them. They came bearing supplies. A roll of packing tape that looked like it had been stolen from a post office in 1987, one marker with a dried-out tip, and approximately 400 black garbage bags. Not moving boxes. Not storage containers. Garbage bags. Because apparently, that's what you use when you're packing up trash, and I guess that's what I was now. Yesterday's garbage, ready for the curb. We figured this would be easier, Dylan announced, holding up the bags like he'd just solved world hunger. Boxes are expensive, man. And heavy. These babies are light, cheap, and they hold a ton. I sat in my wheelchair near the bedroom door, watching this disaster unfold in real time. You know what else garbage bags are good for? I asked. Garbage. Which is fitting, I guess, considering the whole situation. Bryce laughed, completely missing the point. See, that's what I love about you, Marcus. Still got that sense of humor. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies, like he wasn't actively participating in making me homeless. The cognitive dissonance was honestly impressive. They started with my closet, which should have been a relatively straightforward task. Take clothes off hangers, fold them, pack them neatly. Except Dylan and Bryce approached this like they were in a speedrun competition for world's worst movers. They grabbed entire armfuls of shirts, still on hangers, and just stuffed them into bags. No folding, no organizing, no separation of casual wear from work clothes. My favorite jacket, the leather one I'd saved up for 3 months to buy, got crammed in with gym shorts and old t-shirts. I watched a cashmere sweater that cost more than Bryce's car payment disappear into a bag that definitely had something sticky on the outside. You guys know those hangers don't belong to me, right? I said. Those are Claire's fancy wooden hangers. The ones she bought from that overpriced container store. Dylan paused mid-stuff. Oh crap. Really? Really? She'll notice. She's like a hanger accountant. Takes inventory monthly. They spent the next 15 minutes trying to extract hangers from garbage bags, which was like watching someone perform surgery with oven mitts. Shirts fell on the floor. A pair of dress pants somehow ended up tangled with a phone charger. It was chaos. Beautiful, stupid chaos. But the real masterpiece came when they moved to my books. I had maybe 75 books on the shelf an hour. Sorry, Claire's bedroom. History, business, some fiction, a few technical manuals about industrial safety that definitely aren't bestsellers, but are fascinating if you're into that sort of thing. I'd collected them over years, some from college, some from used bookstores, a few signed copies from author events. Each one had a memory attached. Dylan looked at the shelf, looked at his garbage bag, and I swear I could see the singular brain cell bouncing around his skull, trying to figure out what to do. Just toss them in, Bryce suggested. Books are just paper. They'll be fine. Books are not just paper, you Neanderthal, I said. That's like saying the Mona Lisa is just paint. Show some respect. Dude, they're going in a bag either way, Dylan said, already grabbing a handful. Hardcovers mixed with paperbacks. Spines bent at weird angles. A signed first edition of a book about engineering failures. Oh, the irony. Got shoved in upside down next to my old physics textbook. I died a little inside with each careless toss. Then came my laptop. My beautiful, custom-built laptop with 3 years of work files, design schematics, client contacts, and roughly 7,000 browser tabs I kept meaning to organize. Bryce picked it up from my desk, didn't even close it first, just slammed it shut, and looked around for something to put it in. That needs padding, I said quickly. Bubble wrap. A laptop case. Literally anything protective. It'll be fine, Bryce said, wrapping it in a t-shirt and dropping it into a garbage bag with my shoes. My shoes. The ones I couldn't even wear anymore, but had kept for sentimental reasons, and also because I was in denial about my legs. See? Padded. I made a mental note to check that laptop immediately upon arrival at wherever I was going, because I guaranteed the screen would be cracked. But honestly, what was I going to do? Well, over there and physically stop them. I tried that earlier when they were packing my kitchen stuff, and I'd nearly gotten knocked over when Dylan turned around with an armful of plates. Careful, bro, he'd said, like I was the hazard in this situation. My guitar, a Martin acoustic I'd bought 10 years ago when I briefly believed I could become the next indie folk sensation, got special treatment, by which I mean Bryce carried it by the neck like a baseball bat and leaned it against the wall near a garbage bag full of God knows what. I watched the headstock wobble dangerously close to the doorframe and considered just letting it fall. Maybe the sound of wood splintering would match my internal screaming. We can't carry you up and down the stairs forever, Claire had said the day before, and now here was the follow-through. Never mind that I'd asked exactly once for help getting upstairs, and that was literally the first day home from the hospital. Never mind that I'd already started researching stair lifts and accessibility modifications. Never mind that forever apparently meant less than 48 hours before we give up entirely. But sure, Claire. Sure. The stairs were the real problem here. By noon, they'd accumulated what looked like a crime scene. Black garbage bags everywhere, some tied, some not, contents unknown and probably jumbled beyond recognition. My life, reduced to what appeared to be evidence disposal. Dylan stood in the middle of it all, hands on his hips, surveying their work with unearned pride. That wasn't so bad, he declared. Probably got everything, right? Everything except my dignity, I muttered. But that left the building 2 days ago. Bryce snorted. You're hilarious, man. I'm gonna miss having you around. The thing was, he seemed genuine. Like he actually would miss me. Like he hadn't just spent 4 hours treating my possessions like landfill material. The cognitive dissonance was giving me whiplash. These guys existed in a reality where you could participate in someone's eviction and still consider yourself the good guy. It was impressive, really. The mental gymnastics required for that level of self-deception could win Olympic gold. So where are we taking this stuff? Dylan asked, gesturing at Mount Garbage Bag. Good question. Claire had asked me the same thing that morning, with the kind of fake concern that made me want to throw something. Do you have somewhere to go? She'd asked. Because obviously you can't stay here, but we want to make sure you land somewhere safe. How thoughtful. How considerate. How completely full of it. Out loud, I'd said, don't worry about it. I've got it handled. The truth? I absolutely had it handled. But they didn't need to know that yet. There's a storage unit downtown, I lied smoothly. And I've got a temporary place lined up. Just need you guys to load everything into whatever vehicle shows up. What kind of vehicle? Bryce asked suspiciously. I checked my phone, pulling up the app I'd used the night before. Should be here in about 30 minutes. Black van, wheelchair accessible, professional moving service. Dylan's eyebrows shot up. Moving service? Dude, those are expensive. Yeah, well, I said, wheeling toward the living room where more garbage bags awaited. I figured if I'm being thrown out, I might as well leave in style. Think of it as my parting gift to myself, a ride that doesn't treat me like trash. Unlike some people I could mention. But I kept that last part internal, savoring it like a good wine. Because here's what Dylan and Bryce didn't know, what Claire didn't know, what nobody in this house had bothered to ask about during my hospital stay. I wasn't broke. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't the burden they'd convinced themselves I was. I was something much worse for them. I was free. And in about 30 minutes, they were going to get their first hint that maybe, just maybe, they'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. I couldn't wait. Here's what Claire, Dylan, Bryce, and pretty much everyone else in my life didn't know. While I was lying in that hospital bed for 2 weeks, pumped full of painkillers and contemplating my newly uncertain future, I wasn't just recovering from a catastrophic fall. I was closing the deal of a lifetime. Because apparently, nothing says perfect timing like negotiating a multi-million-dollar acquisition while your vertebrae are still deciding whether or not they want to be friends again. Let me back up. My company, Safety First Innovations, yes, I know, the irony is not lost on me, had been on the radar of Global Shield Industries for about 18 months. Global Shield is one of those massive engineering conglomerates that you've never heard of, but that literally builds half the infrastructure in North America. Bridges, tunnels, skyscrapers, the works. And they'd been watching my little startup because we'd developed a fall protection harness system that was genuinely revolutionary. Lighter, stronger, smarter than anything on the market. We had sensors that could predict equipment failure before it happened, materials that could withstand impacts that would turn regular harnesses into confetti, and a price point that made us competitive with the garbage equipment most companies were using. Global Shield had been circling for months, sending their corporate development people to our offices, asking pointed questions, making those, "we're just curious," inquiries that actually mean, "we're calculating how much you're worth." My CFO, Janet, who's basically a financial shark in a pantsuit, had been managing the conversations, keeping them interested but not desperate. Playing hard to get, corporate edition. Then I fell off a building. Or rather, off a scaffold attached to a building. But let's not split hairs. You'd think that would kill the deal, right? CEO has catastrophic accident. Company loses its visionary leader, acquisition talks die on the vine. That's what I thought too, lying there in the ICU, mentally writing the obituary for my business dreams. But here's the thing about corporate giants. They don't care about your personal drama. They care about intellectual property, market share, and profit margins. And Safety First had all three in spades. 3 days after my surgery, while I was still figuring out how to use a bedpan without wanting to die from embarrassment, Janet video called me. "They want to accelerate," she said, her face pixelated on my hospital room TV that doubled as a monitor. "The accident actually made them more interested. Proves the market need. Shows that even the experts aren't safe with current equipment. That's the most capitalist thing I've ever heard." I replied, my voice slurred from medication. My spine explodes and their response is, "Great marketing opportunity." "Welcome to American business, baby," Janet said. "So do you want to hear the offer or not?" The offer was staggering. $8.5 million, with performance bonuses that could push it over $10 million if we hit certain milestones in the first year post-acquisition. They'd keep the team intact, maintain the brand, and offer me a position as Director of Safety Innovation with a salary that made my previous CEO compensation look like allowance money. The only catch: they wanted to close fast. Sign the papers, transfer the assets, announce the deal, all within 6 weeks. They're worried you might die, Janet explained bluntly. No offense, but if you kick it before the ink is dry, the whole deal gets complicated. Estate lawyers, probate, your wife inheriting everything. They want this locked down while you're still alive and lucid. I'm not dying, I said. The doctors were very clear. Paralysis is temporary. I'm already getting sensation back. Great. Tell that to the lawyers. In the meantime, should I tell them yes? I thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. My company, my baby, my 5-year obsession, being absorbed into a corporate behemoth. It should have felt like surrender, like selling out. But you know what it actually felt like? Freedom. Because I'd built safety first with my own money, my own credit, and yeah, okay, one significant loan from Claire's trust fund that she reminded me about roughly once a week. If I sold now, I could pay her back triple and never owe her anything ever again. Tell them yes, I said. Let's do this. The next 4 weeks were a blur of video conferences from my hospital bed, digital signatures, lawyer consultations, and NDAs thicker than the Bible. Claire visited during some of these meetings. Remember, this was during her brief, concerned wife phase before she evolved into you're a burden mode. But I always muted the microphone and turned off the camera when she was around. Just checking emails, I'd tell her. Work stuff. Nothing important. She never asked for details. Never questioned why I was spending so much time on my laptop when I was supposed to be resting. She was too busy on her phone, probably texting Dylan and Bryce about how difficult this all was for her. Poor Claire, saddled with a temporarily disabled husband. How would she cope? How would she survive this trial? Narrator voice, she wouldn't have to. The deal closed on a Wednesday, exactly 1 week before I was discharged from the hospital. $8.5 million hit my business account, then immediately got redistributed according to the plan Janet and I had worked out. Pay off all company debts. Give generous bonuses to our 12 employees. Set up a trust for ongoing operations. Pay back Claire's trust fund loan with interest. And put a very comfortable chunk into my personal accounts. Accounts that Claire didn't have access to because I'd opened them during my bachelor days and never gotten around to making them joint accounts. Funny how procrastination sometimes saves your life. I also did something else, something that seemed crazy at the time, but makes perfect sense now. I rented a penthouse. Downtown, in one of those luxury buildings that looks like it was designed by someone who watched too much science fiction. 23rd floor, 2-bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, and, this is the important part, completely, totally, impossibly accessible. The building had been designed with universal accessibility in mind, which apparently is a thing now in high-end real estate. Wide doorways, roll-in showers, adjustable countertops, voice-controlled everything. It was like someone had built a penthouse specifically for a wealthy disabled person, and I qualified on both counts now. I rented it under my holding company's name, Hall Industries LLC, a shell corporation I'd set up years ago for tax purposes, with a 2-year lease, paid in full. The property management company never met me, never saw my wheelchair, never knew anything except that the money cleared and their new tenant wanted to move in immediately upon discharge from the hospital. Why are you doing this? Janet asked when I told her about the apartment. You have a house. You have a wife. You could use that money for medical expenses, accessibility modifications, actually smart things. Call it a backup plan, I said. Insurance. A safety net. You literally design safety nets for a living. Exactly. I know their value. She didn't push it, which is why Janet is the best. She just processed the payment and kept her thoughts to herself. But I could see her brain working, calculating, probably figuring out what I already knew. My marriage was circling the drain. You don't rent a luxury penthouse as a backup plan unless you're pretty sure you're going to need it. The apartment was ready 2 days before I got discharged. I had it furnished through an online service. Minimalist, modern, expensive. Bed that could adjust to any position. Couch that was the perfect height for wheelchair transfers. Kitchen that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. I even splurged on art for the walls, because if I was going to get kicked out of my own house, I was at least going to land somewhere that didn't look like a hospital room extension. Claire drove me home from the hospital, complaining the entire time about traffic, the parking garage fees, how the hospital wheelchair attendant had been rude to her. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city go by, thinking about my secret apartment waiting for me downtown, my secret bank accounts, my secret new job title that wouldn't be announced for another month. I felt like a superhero with a secret identity. Mild-mannered, disabled husband by day, secretly wealthy director of innovation by night. Except, actually disabled and not fighting crime. But the secret identity part was accurate. When she announced 3 days later that I needed to leave, that I was a burden, that Dylan and Bryce would help me pack, I almost laughed. Almost told her right then about the money, the apartment, the deal. But something stopped me. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was strategic thinking. Maybe it was just the petty satisfaction of knowing that she thought she was throwing away trash when she was actually discarding treasure. So I played along, acted defeated, let them pack my life into garbage bags, watched them fumble through my belongings like they were cleaning out a storage unit. And the whole time, I was thinking about my penthouse with the skyline view, my bank account with more commas than Claire had ever seen, and my new job title that would make her choke on her morning coffee when she found out. They thought they were getting rid of a burden. They had no idea they were evicting their meal ticket, their safety net, and their biggest mistake all rolled into one wheelchair-using package. But they'd figure it out soon enough. Very, very soon. Claire expected a taxi, maybe an Uber if I was feeling fancy. She'd probably pictured some beat-up sedan pulling up to the curb, a driver helping me awkwardly transfer from my wheelchair while neighbors watched from their windows, the whole scene radiating fallen on hard times energy. It would fit the narrative she'd been building in her head. Tragic accident, unfortunate circumstances, difficult decisions. We tried our best, but sometimes love isn't enough. Very Lifetime movie channel. Very, we're the victims here too. What she got instead was something else entirely. At exactly 1 o'clock, as Dylan and Bryce were loading the last of my garbage bag possessions onto the front porch like they were setting out trash for collection day, a vehicle turned onto our street. Not a taxi. Not an Uber. A gleaming black Mercedes Sprinter van, the kind that costs more than most people's cars, with tinted windows and a hydraulic wheelchair lift that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. It pulled up to our curb with the kind of smooth, expensive silence that only German engineering can produce. The driver stepped out wearing an actual suit. Not a polo shirt, not a hoodie, but a legitimate three-piece suit like he was driving dignitaries to the UN. He was maybe 50, salt and pepper hair, the kind of professional bearing that suggested he'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing. He walked up our driveway, past Dylan who was frozen mid-garbage bag carry, and approached me with a slight nod. "Mr. Hall?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of calm professionalism that makes you feel like everything is under control even when your life is literally packed in trash bags. "That's me," I said, trying not to smile too obviously. "I'm James. I'll be handling your transportation today. Shall we begin loading your belongings?" Claire had appeared on the porch, her phone in hand, probably mid-text about what a difficult morning this had been. She looked at the van, then at James, then at me, her expression cycling through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been the first inkling that she'd miscalculated something. "What is this?" she asked. "This," I said, gesturing at the van like I was presenting a game show prize, "is my ride. Pretty sweet, right?" Dylan had set down his garbage bag and was circling the van like a kid at a car show, peering at the windows, checking out the wheelchair lift. "Dude, is this like a medical transport?" "It's a private mobility service," James corrected smoothly, already moving toward the pile of my belongings. "We specialize in accessible luxury transportation. Mr. Hall has contracted us for the afternoon." He picked up 2 garbage bags with the kind of dignified efficiency that suggested he'd handled far stranger cargo than my hastily packed life. Bryce wandered over, clearly impressed despite himself. "How much does something like this cost?" James smiled politely, the kind of smile that says, "I'm not discussing finances with you," and continued loading bags into the van with a grace that made Dylan and Bryce's earlier packing job look even more pathetic in comparison. "I didn't even know you knew how to order Uber XL," Dylan muttered, watching James work. I rolled closer to the van, enjoying this more than I probably should have. "Oh, this isn't Uber XL. This is X-Spouse Transport Incorporated," specializing in fast exits from bad marriages. 5 stars on Yelp. Highly recommend their dignity restoration package. Claire's eyes narrowed. She'd developed this expression over the years, the one that said she was doing mental math and not liking the results. Marcus, how are you paying for this? Does it matter? I asked. You're getting what you wanted. I'm leaving. The method of departure shouldn't concern you. It concerns me if you're spending money we don't have on vanity transport when you should be saving for medical expenses. The audacity, the sheer, unfiltered audacity of this woman who was literally evicting me from our house, who'd called me a burden less than 48 hours ago, now suddenly concerned about my financial decisions. I could feel the sarcasm building up like pressure in a shaken soda bottle. First of all, I said, keeping my voice level, there is no we anymore. You made that pretty clear. Second, my medical expenses are covered by insurance, which you'd know if you'd asked literally anything about my situation beyond, when can we get rid of you? And third, I gestured at James, who was now carefully securing my garbage bags with actual tie-down straps like my stuff mattered. I'm an adult with my own bank account. I can order whatever transportation I want. Dylan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden tension. So, where exactly are you going? You never actually said. Downtown, I replied, which was true but spectacularly incomplete. Got a place lined up. Fully accessible. View of the city. Very nice. Like an assisted living facility? Bryce asked, and I couldn't tell if he was being deliberately obtuse or if that was just his natural state. Sure, I said. Let's go with that. Assisted living. That's exactly what it is. James had finished loading everything, somehow making the pile of garbage bags look almost organized in the van's cargo area, and was now extending the wheelchair lift. It unfolded with a smooth mechanical whir, like a transformer deciding to become a ramp. He locked it in place, tested it twice, then nodded at me. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Hall. I rolled toward the lift, then paused and turned back to look at Claire, Dylan, and Bryce standing in front of the house. My house. Well, our house. Well, her house now, I guess. The place where I'd lived for 5 years, where I'd celebrated promotions and mourned failures, where I'd believed I was building a life. It looked smaller now, shabbier. Or maybe that was just my perspective changing. Thanks for everything, I said, and I didn't even try to hide the sarcasm. Really, you've taught me so much about family, loyalty, and the importance of reading the fine print on marriage vows. Turns out, in sickness and in health, has an asterisk that says, unless the sickness is inconvenient. Claire opened her mouth to respond, probably to deliver some rehearsed line about how this was hard for everyone or how I was being unfair, but I was already rolling onto the lift. James pressed a button and the hydraulic system engaged, lifting me smoothly up to the van's floor level. It was the smoothest, most dignified ascent I'd experienced since the accident. Take that, front porch stairs that Claire said were too difficult to navigate. The interior of the van was absurd. Leather captain's chairs, climate control, ambient lighting, and enough space to park 2 wheelchairs comfortably. My chair locked into a securing system that was somehow both high-tech and elegant. James made sure I was properly secured, handed me a bottle of water from a mini fridge, because of course there was a mini fridge, and closed the door. Through the tinted window, I could see Claire, Dylan, and Bryce still standing there, looking confused and slightly concerned, like they'd just watched a magic trick they couldn't explain. Claire had her arms crossed, her phone dangling from one hand. Dylan was scratching his head. Bryce just looked impressed by the van, because Bryce had the attention span of a goldfish and the priorities to match. James slid into the driver's seat, adjusted his mirrors, and glanced back at me. All set, Mr. Hall. All set, I confirmed. Let's get out of here before they realize they should be asking more questions. He chuckled, actually chuckled, and started the engine. It purred to life with that expensive car sound that's somehow both powerful and whisper quiet. We pulled away from the curb smoothly, no jerking, no sudden movements, just pure German engineering doing its thing. I watched the house shrink in the side mirror. Watched Claire finally pull out her phone, probably to start texting her friends about the weird van and my suspicious behavior. Watched Dylan and Bryce head back inside, probably to raid my former beer fridge. Watched my old life disappear behind us as we turned the corner. First time leaving after a separation? James asked, his eyes on the road but his tone understanding. That obvious? I've driven this route before. Different people, same situation. You're handling it better than most. Yeah, well, I said, settling back into my chair and taking a sip of the fancy water that probably cost more per bottle than my old coffee budget. It's easier to handle when you've got a plan. I suspect you've got more than a plan, Mr. Hall, James said, and there was something in his voice, approval, maybe, or recognition. If you don't mind me saying, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve, I admitted. But they don't know that yet. They will soon enough. Yeah, I said, watching downtown skyline come into view through the windshield, glass towers reflecting the afternoon sun. Yeah, they will. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the van eating up miles between my old life and my new one. James navigated traffic with the skill of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. I watched the city pass by, the neighborhoods getting nicer, the buildings getting taller, the people on the sidewalks looking more expensive. We're approaching your building, Mr. Hall, James announced as we turned onto a tree-lined street where every car cost more than I used to make in a year. The Meridian Tower, correct? That's the one, I said, sitting up straighter. Through the windshield, I could see it. All 35 stories of glass and steel, the kind of building that made you feel rich just by existing near it. James pulled into the circular driveway where a doorman in an actual uniform was already approaching. Welcome home, Mr. Hall, James said as he put the van in park. Home. The word hit different now. Not the house I'd just left, not the place I'd shared with Claire, but this. This tower, this penthouse, this completely unknown future that I'd bought and paid for with my own damn money. Thanks, James, I said. Seriously, this was perfect. My pleasure, sir. I'll have your belongings brought up within the hour. As the door opened and the lift deployed and the doorman greeted me by name, my actual name, which meant the building management had briefed the staff, I felt something shift. Not just location, but identity. I wasn't the guy being thrown out anymore. I was the guy who'd landed on his feet. Well, metaphorically speaking, my new apartment wasn't just accessible. It was smarter than Dylan and Bryce combined, which admittedly wasn't a high bar to clear. The kitchen counters adjusted height with the press of a button, rising and lowering like something out of a sci-fi movie. The bathroom had a shower you could roll directly into, with a bench seat and controls that responded to voice commands. Shower start. Temperature, 102 degrees. Boom. Perfect hot water, no fumbling with knobs, no awkward transfers. Even the lighting was voice-controlled. Lights, 50%. And the whole place would dim to whatever ambience I wanted. It was like living in the Starship Enterprise, if the Enterprise had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown and a monthly rent that could finance a small car. The balcony was my favorite part. 23rd floor, wraparound view of the city skyline, accessible through doors wide enough to accommodate my wheelchair with room to spare. I'd roll out there in the mornings with my coffee, fancy stuff from the cafe downstairs, none of that grocery store swill I used to drink, and watch the city wake up. Tiny people rushing to their tiny jobs, dealing with their tiny problems, while I sat up here like some kind of disabled Tony Stark, plotting my next move. But the best feature wasn't the smart home tech or the view, or even the fact that my bedroom had a bed that could transform into basically a hospital bed if I needed it. No, the best feature was that it was mine. Paid for by me, furnished by me, occupied by me. No Claire nagging about dishes in the sink. No Dylan, just crashing for a few days. That turned into 3 weeks. No Bryce asking to borrow money for his latest cryptocurrency scheme. Just me, my wheelchair, and enough square footage to do donuts if I wanted. Which I did. Once. Don't judge. The rehab center was 4 blocks away, close enough that I could get there easily, far enough that I could pretend I was going on an adventure. 3 times a week, I'd will myself down the pristine sidewalks of downtown's fancy district, past boutiques I'd never shop in and restaurants with prices that made my old budget weep, to a medical building that specialized in spinal injury rehabilitation. Dr. Lopez ran the program, and she was exactly the kind of person you want in charge of putting your spine back together. Competent, no nonsense, and completely immune to self-pity. First day, she'd looked at my chart, looked at me, and said, T11, T12 incomplete injury, regaining sensation, good prognosis. You'll walk again if you do the work. Question is, will you do the work? Is that a challenge? I'd asked. It's a fact. I've got patients who are here twice a week, going through the motions, complaining the whole time. They make minimal progress. Then I've got patients who treat this like a job, show up angry, and channel that anger into every rep. They recover faster. Which type are you? I'd thought about Claire's face when she'd called me a burden. About Dylan and Bryce stuffing my life into garbage bags. About the house I'd paid for becoming a place I wasn't welcome. I'm definitely the angry type, I'd said. She'd smiled. Good. Anger is excellent fuel. Let's put it to use. And we did. Oh boy, did we ever. Physical therapy, it turns out, is basically like going to the gym except everything hurts more and the exercises have names like pelvic tilt and glute bridge that sound like yoga positions designed by sadists. There were parallel bars for practicing standing. There were resistance bands for rebuilding muscle. There were balance exercises that made me feel like a toddler learning to walk, which was frustrating and humbling and exactly the kind of challenge that made me push harder. Marcus, you're progressing faster than any patient I've had, Dr. Lopez told me after my third week. We were in the standing frame. This contraption that basically holds you upright while your legs remember what vertical is supposed to feel like. I'd graduated from 5-minute sessions to 20 minutes, and my legs were screaming, but in that good way that meant nerves were reconnecting, muscles were rebuilding, things were happening. I'm highly motivated, I said through gritted teeth. I can see that. What's motivating you? Family support? Career goals? Spite, I said honestly. Pure, unfiltered spite. Also revenge. Revenge is a great motivator. She laughed. Well, whatever works. Just don't hurt yourself proving a point. But that was the thing. I couldn't hurt myself. Not any more than I already had been. The fall had been rock bottom. Everything since then was climbing up, one painful rep at a time. And every time the burn hit, every time my muscles screamed and my brain said, maybe that's enough for today, I'd picture Claire's face. Her dismissive expression. Her casual cruelty. You're a burden now. And I'd do one more rep, then another, then another. I called them revenge reps. Every bicep curl was for the time Claire told her mother I was difficult to manage, like I was a problematic pet. Every leg press was for Dylan's comment about how they couldn't carry me forever after helping exactly once. Every core exercise was for Bryce asking if I'd thought about just staying positive, like positive thinking could regenerate nerve tissue. Each rep was a middle finger to everyone who'd written me off. The other patients noticed. There was Gary, a 50-something guy who'd been in a motorcycle accident and had a similar injury to mine. He'd been in rehab for 8 months and had plateaued, content with using his wheelchair full-time. There was Michelle, a young woman who'd been injured in a car accident and was making steady but slow progress. There was Tom, an older guy who treated rehab like a social club, more interested in chatting than working. And then there was me, the angry guy in the corner who showed up 30 minutes early to do extra warm-ups and stayed late to squeeze in additional exercises. The guy who asked Dr. Lopez for homework assignments, actual physical therapy homework, so I could keep working between sessions. Dude, you're making us all look bad, Gary joked one day as I was doing my third set of seated rows while he was taking a water break from his first set. Good, I said, not joking at all. Maybe that'll motivate you. What's your hurry, man? We're all in the same boat here. No, I said, setting down the resistance band and wiping sweat from my forehead. We're really not. You're accepting this as your new normal. I'm treating it as a temporary setback. Big difference. He'd looked offended for about 3 seconds, then thoughtful. The next session, he showed up 20 minutes early and asked Dr. Lopez to increase his weights. Spite, it's contagious. My apartment's building had a gym on the 10th floor, residents only, equipped with everything from treadmills to weight machines to a pool that was kept at exactly 84 degrees for therapeutic purposes. I started going there on my off days from rehab, working on upper body strength, core stability, anything that would speed up my recovery. The gym was usually empty in the mornings, which was perfect. Just me, my wheelchair, a bench press, and an increasingly impressive collection of angry thoughts to power through. I'd transferred from wheelchair to weight bench so many times that I could do it smoothly now, no awkward fumbling, no fear of falling. I'd learned which machines were accessible and which ones required modifications. I'd figured out that the pool was actually amazing for leg exercises because the water supported my weight while my muscles relearned their job. And slowly, week by week, session by session, revenge rep by revenge rep, things changed. Sensation that had been vague and fuzzy became clearer, more specific. Toes I couldn't wiggle started responding. Muscles that had been dormant started firing. I graduated from the standing frame to standing independently with parallel bars. Then to taking steps, awkward, shaky, baby giraffe steps, but steps. This is remarkable progress, Dr. Lopez said during my 8th week. I just walked 6 feet between the parallel bars without stopping, without my legs giving out. 6 feet. It was pathetic by normal human standards and absolutely incredible by a guy who couldn't feel his legs 2 months ago standards. When can I ditch the wheelchair? I asked. Don't rush it. The wheelchair is a tool, not a prison. You'll probably need it for months still, especially for longer distances. But for short distances, with a walker or crutches, maybe another month if you keep progressing like this. Another month. I could do another month. I'd already done 2. What was one more? Especially when every day brought me closer to the moment when I could walk back into Claire's life. Literally walk. And show her exactly what she'd thrown away. At night, after rehab and gym sessions and enough physical exertion to make every muscle in my body hate me, I'd sit on my balcony with a protein shake, because Dr. Lopez had me on this whole nutrition plan too, and look out at the city. Somewhere out there, Claire was probably telling her friends about her difficult situation, about how hard it had been to make the tough decision, about how she hoped I was managing okay in whatever assisted living facility she thought I'd ended up in. She had no idea I was living in a penthouse that cost more per month than our old mortgage. She had no idea I was regaining function faster than anyone expected. She had no idea that every revenge rep, every spite-fueled exercise, every "I'll show them" moment was building towards something she couldn't imagine. My phone would buzz occasionally with texts from old friends. Hey man, heard about the separation. You doing okay? I'd respond with vague reassurances. Yeah. Staying with family for now. Focusing on recovery. Let them think what they wanted. Let Claire's narrative spread. Let everyone believe I was the tragic victim in this story. They'd learn the truth soon enough. But not yet. Not until I was ready. Not until the reveal would hit with maximum impact. I had a press release scheduled for next month. A TV interview lined up. A whole PR campaign ready to launch that would introduce me as Global Shield's new Director of Safety Innovation. The guy who turned a catastrophic accident into a multi-million-dollar success story. Claire thought she'd kicked out the trash. She'd actually thrown away the trophy. And in about 4 weeks, the trophy was going to show up on national television, walking with a cane, wearing a custom suit, and explaining how temporary setbacks can lead to permanent success. I couldn't wait to see her face. But first, more revenge reps. Dr. Lopez wanted me doing leg presses this afternoon, and I had a lot of spite to work through. Time to get back to work. Weeks passed in my new life, and my phone stayed suspiciously quiet. Not a single text from Claire asking how I was doing. No calls from Dylan or Bryce checking if I'd landed somewhere safe. Radio silence. Complete and total radio silence. It was like I'd been erased from their lives with the same casual efficiency they'd used to pack my stuff into garbage bags. Out of sight, out of mind, problem solved. At first, it stung a little. Not gonna lie. 8 years of marriage, 5 years of knowing her brothers, holidays together, inside jokes, shared history, all of it apparently worth exactly nothing once I became inconvenient. But then the sting faded and got replaced by something better, curiosity. What story were they telling? How were they spinning this? Because I knew Claire, and Claire was nothing if not image conscious. She wouldn't just admit to kicking out her temporarily paralyzed husband. That would make her look bad. No. She'd have crafted a narrative, something that made her look sympathetic, maybe even noble. Enter Leah. Leah was my neighbor. Well, my old neighbor from the house. She lived 3 doors down, was in her 60s, had absolutely zero filter, and had never particularly liked Claire. That woman has the warmth of a parking meter, she told me once at a block party. Pretty to look at, expensive to maintain, and only accepts payment. I'd laughed it off at the time because, that was my wife she was talking about. But Leah had called it. She'd absolutely called it. 2 weeks after I moved out, Leah tracked down my number. Don't ask me how. The woman had intelligence gathering skills that would make the CIA jealous, and called me. Marcus? It's Leah. From Maple Street. Don't hang up. Why would I hang up? I asked, genuinely confused. Because you might think I'm calling to be nosy, which I am, but I'm also calling because you need to know what's being said about you. I settled deeper into my fancy apartment couch. Oh, this should be good. What's the official story? Claire's telling everyone you're resting at a special facility. I could hear the air quotes in her voice. Very vague, very mysterious. She makes it sound like you're at some fancy rehabilitation resort, getting top-tier care, really focusing on your recovery. She's positioning herself as the supportive wife who made the difficult decision to let you get professional help because she wanted what was best for you. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. A special facility. That's rich. Does this special facility have a 23rd floor view and voice-controlled lighting? You're not in a facility, are you? Nope. I'm in a penthouse downtown. Living my best life. Doing great, actually. I knew it. Leah sounded delighted. I told Harold, that's my husband. I said, Harold, something doesn't add up. Marcus isn't the type to just disappear into some facility. But everyone's buying Claire's story. She's getting sympathy points left and right. Oh, poor Claire. Such a hard decision. She's so brave. He's so lucky to have her support. More air quotes. It's nauseating. What else is she saying? Well, apparently Dylan got promoted at work, which we both know is code for they gave him a new title with no pay raise, and they're planning a big backyard barbecue to celebrate. This Sunday. Whole neighborhood's invited. I got an invitation yesterday. Very fancy cardstock. Probably cost more than it should. A barbecue. Of course. Nothing says, we're good people, like a neighborhood barbecue where you can control the narrative while serving overpriced hamburgers. I could picture it perfectly. Claire playing hostess, Dylan accepting congratulations for his meaningless promotion, Bryce manning the grill, and probably burning everything. All of them casually mentioning how Marcus is doing so well at his facility, while avoiding any actual details. Are you going? I asked Leah. Oh, I'm absolutely going. Someone needs to be there to watch this performance. Plus, the invitation said they're serving salmon, and I'm not passing up free salmon just because the hosts are morally bankrupt. Fair point. Keep me updated. Marcus, I'm going to give you a play-by-play so detailed you'll feel like you're there. Which you're not. Because you're at a special facility. She cackled at her own joke. True to her word, Leah became my spy in enemy territory. She'd text me updates throughout the week leading up to the barbecue. Apparently, Claire had gone full Martha Stewart mode, ordering special decorations, hiring a professional to deep clean the house, even getting the lawn professionally manicured. Dylan's promotion had become this whole production, like he'd been elected president instead of just getting a new email signature. She's really selling it. Leah texted Wednesday evening. New patio furniture. String lights. The works. This barbecue has a budget that could feed a small country. Thursday. Ran into Claire at the grocery store. She asked how I was doing with such fake concern I almost laughed. Then she mentioned, if you hear from Marcus, let him know we're thinking of him. Like I'm your carrier pigeon. Friday. The catering truck just showed up. Catering truck. For a backyard barbecue. Who are these people? I sat in my apartment, watching these updates roll in, feeling like I was watching a reality show about my own life. It was surreal. They were throwing a party at the house I'd paid for, celebrating a promotion at a job I'd helped Dylan get through my professional connections, all while maintaining the fiction that I was peacefully recovering somewhere far away. The temptation to crash the barbecue was overwhelming. Just roll up in my wheelchair, smile, wave, and watch the narrative collapse in real time. But no, that would be satisfying for about 30 seconds. And then what? They'd scramble, make excuses, probably paint me as the bad guy for making a scene. No, if I was going to make an entrance back into their lives, it needed to be bigger than a backyard barbecue ambush. Saturday morning, Leah sent me a photo. The backyard setup, taken from her upper window with what I can only assume was a telephoto lens because the detail was incredible. String lights crisscrossed over the patio. A banner that said, "Congratulations, Dylan," in letters big enough to see from space. Tables with fancy tablecloths. A bar setup that looked semi-professional. It was like they were hosting a wedding reception for mediocrity. This is insane, I texted back. Wait till you see tomorrow. I'm bringing my good camera. For posterity. Sunday arrived, and I spent the morning at rehab, doing my revenge reps with extra intensity because I knew what was happening across town. Dr. Lopez noticed my increased aggression. Something on your mind today? She asked as I powered through leg presses like I was trying to move a mountain. Just thinking about people who underestimated me. I said, well, whatever you're thinking about, it's working. You just did twice your usual reps. By afternoon, I was back at my apartment, showered, sitting on my balcony with my phone, waiting for Leah's intel. The first text came at 2:47 p.m., right when the barbecue was supposed to start. It's begun. At least 40 people here. Claire's wearing white pants. White. To a barbecue. That's a power move. 2:53 p.m., Dylan's giving a speech. About his promotion, which apparently involved taking on new responsibilities and stepping up as a team leader. I'm pretty sure he just got a new desk. 3:15 p.m., someone just asked about you. Claire got this pained expression and said you're doing remarkably well, considering. Considering what? She didn't elaborate. Very mysterious. 3:42 p.m., Bryce is drunk. It's not even 4 o'clock. 4:18 p.m., the salmon is dry. This is what she gets for pretending to be fancy. I was laughing at that last text when another one came through, this one longer. Okay, so Brenda Morrison, you know her, lives on the corner. Just ask Claire directly when you'd be back. And Claire said, and I quote, Marcus needs to focus on his recovery right now. We're giving him space to heal without any pressure. It's what he needs. Then she did this sad smile thing like she's the hero in a Hallmark movie. I nearly threw my salmon at her. Space to heal. Right. Because kicking me out and packing my stuff in garbage bags was such a healing gesture. The reframing was actually impressive in its audacity. She'd taken, we threw him out because he was inconvenient, and transformed it into we're nobly sacrificing our desire to have him home because we care so much about his recovery. It was a masterclass in spin. More texts rolled in throughout the afternoon. Stories about how people were praising Claire's strength. How Dylan was basking in attention for his meaningless promotion. How Bryce had indeed gotten drunk and was now telling anyone who'd listen about his cryptocurrency investments, which everyone was politely ignoring. The last text came at 6:32 p.m. Barbecue's winding down. Final assessment. Claire successfully maintained her narrative. Everyone thinks she's a saint and you're convalescing peacefully somewhere. Dylan got a fancy watch as a congratulations gift from his parents. Bryce passed out in a lawn chair. The salmon was still dry. I'm going home. This was exhausting. Thanks for the intel, I texted back. Seriously, this was weirdly therapeutic. Anytime. When are you going to blow up their little fantasy world? Soon, I typed. Very soon. I set my phone down and rolled to the edge of my balcony, looking out at the city lights starting to twinkle as the sun set. Somewhere out there, Claire was probably cleaning up from her barbecue, satisfied with her performance, comfortable in her narrative. Dylan was probably admiring his new watch. Bryce was probably still passed out. They had no idea what was coming. My PR team had scheduled the press release for next Sunday, exactly 1 week away. The timing had been strategic, big enough gap after the acquisition closed that all the legal stuff was finalized, but close enough that the momentum was still there. The press release would go out Sunday morning, hit all the major business news sites by noon, and trend on social media by evening. And I'd scheduled my Good Morning America appearance for the Monday after that. Prime time, millions of viewers, national exposure. 1 week. They had one more week of their comfortable narrative, their sympathetic story, their version of events where they were the good guys making tough choices. Then reality would hit like a freight train. I pulled out my phone and texted Janet. We still good for the press release next Sunday? Her response came back immediately, locked and loaded. It's going to be spectacular. The photos turned out amazing. You look like a CEO superhero. Perfect, I texted. Let's make some noise. I allowed myself a moment of petty satisfaction, imagining next Sunday. Claire, probably sleeping in after whatever Saturday night plans she had, waking up to text messages. Friends sending links. Is this your Marcus? The press release photo. Me in a custom suit, sitting in my wheelchair in the Global Shield boardroom, looking confident and successful and very much not at a special facility. The barbecue narrative was cute. Impressive, even. But my counter-narrative was about to be legendary. 1 more week of physical therapy. 1 more week of revenge reps. 1 more week of building strength, both physical and strategic. And then the world would learn that the guy they'd thrown away was actually the prize they'd lost. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. The week leading up to the press release felt like Christmas Eve when you're 8 years old and you know there's a bike waiting for you under the tree. Except instead of a bike, I had a carefully crafted public announcement that was about to detonate Claire's entire narrative like a controlled explosion. And I wasn't 8. I was a grown man with a vendetta and a PR team that knew exactly what they were doing. Janet called me Wednesday to go over final details. We're releasing Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern, she said, all business. That hits the early news cycle, catches people checking their phones over coffee, and gives it all day to spread. By Monday morning, it'll be everywhere. And the photo made it through legal? I asked. The photo was crucial. Me in my wheelchair, custom charcoal suit, signing the contract at the Global Shield boardroom table. Professional, powerful, and very obviously not wasting away in some vague, special facility. Legal loved it. Said it humanizes the story without being exploitative. Shows disability as part of your identity, not the whole story. Plus, you look like a total badass, which doesn't hurt. I am a total badass, I said. Sure, Marcus. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Thursday, I had a particularly brutal physical therapy session. Dr. Lopez had me doing gait training. Basically relearning how to walk with proper form instead of the awkward stumble I'd been managing. It was exhausting, frustrating, and exactly what I needed to channel my nervous energy. You're distracted today, Dr. Lopez observed as I worked my way down the parallel bars for the 15th time. Big week coming up, I said, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Left foot, shift weight, right foot, shift weight. Simple in theory, incredibly difficult in practice when your nervous system is still rebooting. Work-related? You could say that. More like life-related. Career. Public perception. Petty revenge. The usual. She laughed. Well, whatever it is, use it. You just walked 20 feet without stopping. That's a new record. 20 feet. A month ago, I couldn't feel my legs. 2 weeks ago, I could barely manage 5 feet. Now 20. Progress. Powered by spite and the knowledge that Claire's comfortable little world was about to get very uncomfortable. Friday evening, Leah texted, Claire's having people over tomorrow. Saw her at the store buying wine. Lots of wine. Think it's another celebration. Who knows? I texted back. Maybe they're celebrating my successful recovery at my special facility. Can't wait to see her face on Sunday. I'm setting alarms. This is better than the Super Bowl. Saturday, I did something I hadn't done since the accident. I bought new clothes. Real clothes, not just the athletic where I'd been living in for physical therapy. I called a personal shopper. Yes, that's a thing. Yes, I used one, and had them bring options to my apartment. Suits that looked good sitting down. Shirts that didn't bunch weirdly. Pants that actually fit over leg braces. Shoes I could slip on without help. You're preparing for something big, the shopper, whose name was Madison, observed as I tried on the third suit jacket. Press appearance Monday, I said. National TV. Need to look the part. Well, you're going to look incredible. This charcoal gray is perfect with your complexion. Makes your eyes pop. Very, I'm successful and I know it. That's exactly the vibe I'm going for. I bought 3 suits, 2 pairs of shoes, and enough dress shirts to outfit a small boardroom. Madison promised everything would be altered and delivered by Sunday afternoon. Plenty of time for Monday's appearance. I felt like a superhero suiting up for the final battle, except my superpower was capitalism and my weapon was public relations. Saturday night, I barely slept. Not from nerves. I was way past nervous. I was in that weird calm zone that comes after you've planned something so thoroughly that there's nothing left to do but execute. I spent the evening on my balcony, watching the city lights, thinking about how different my life looked now compared to 3 months ago. Then, married, injured, scared, dependent. Now, single, recovering, wealthy, independent. Funny how getting thrown out was the best thing that could have happened to me. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. even though my alarm wasn't set until 7. Couldn't help it. Today was the day. I made coffee. Fancy stuff, the kind that costs more per pound than my old weekly grocery budget, and sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop, waiting. 7:45 a.m. Janet texted. 15 minutes. You ready? Been ready, I texted back. 7:58 a.m. Press release is loaded. Going live in 2 minutes. I opened Twitter on my laptop. Opened LinkedIn. Opened my email. My phone sat next to me, silenced but visible. I wanted to see it all unfold in real time. 8 a.m., the press release went live. It was beautiful, professionally written, perfectly formatted, with that photo of me looking like I owned the world. The headline read, Marcus Hall named Director of Safety Innovation at Global Shield Industries following successful acquisition of Safety First Technologies. The first paragraph laid out the basics, the acquisition, the $8.5 million deal, my new role. The second paragraph talked about my background, my credentials, the safety equipment I designed. The third paragraph, this was Janet's genius, addressed the accident directly. Hall's commitment to safety innovation was reinforced by a personal experience in March when he was injured while personally testing equipment at a construction site. Sometimes the best insights come from the hardest moments, Hall stated. My injury gave me a deeper understanding of the real-world challenges our clients face. I'm more committed than ever to creating safety solutions that actually work. The fourth paragraph mentioned my recovery, my continued work during rehabilitation, and my excitement about the new role. The fifth paragraph had quotes from Global Shield CEO about how valuable I was, how innovative my work had been, how excited they were to have me on the team. And at the bottom, in smaller text, Hall will be appearing on Good Morning America Monday to discuss the acquisition and the future of workplace safety innovation. It was perfect, inspirational without being sappy, professional without being boring. And most importantly, it made me look like exactly what I was, successful, capable, and very much not someone who needed to be thrown away. I watched the press release hit the newswires. Within minutes, it was on Business Insider, then Bloomberg, then Forbes. Tech news sites picked it up because of the acquisition amount. Safety industry publications picked it up because it was relevant to their audience. LinkedIn exploded with shares and comments. 8:15 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Texts from former colleagues. Congratulations. This is amazing. Why didn't you tell us? 8:23 a.m., an email from an old college friend. Dude, you're on Bloomberg. When did you become a big deal? 8:31 a.m., Leah texted. All caps. I just saw the press release. I'm screaming. This is glorious. Does Claire know yet? Not yet. I texted back. But she will soon. 8:47 a.m. The first connection request on LinkedIn from someone at Global Shield I didn't know. Then another. Then 5 more. People were finding me, connecting, congratulating. The notifications were coming in faster than I could read them. 9:03 a.m. Janet called. Marcus, it's blowing up. We've had 3 interview requests already. 2 podcasts and a local news station want you for segments. This is bigger than we expected. How much bigger? The hashtag Burden No More is starting to trend on Twitter. Someone made a meme using your photo with the caption wheelchair? More like thrown. It's got like 50,000 likes already. I pulled up Twitter. Sure enough, hashtag Burden No More was climbing. People were sharing the press release with comments about disability representation, about not underestimating people, about how inspiring it was. Someone had made a whole thread about workplace injuries and how companies should treat employees. Another thread was about accessibility in corporate America. It was becoming a whole thing, way beyond just my personal story. 9:28 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another unknown number. Another voicemail. I checked the first one. Hi, Mr. Hall. This is Rebecca from the Today Show. We'd love to have you on. Delete. I had one media appearance scheduled, and that was enough. 9:45 a.m. Leah called. I answered. She knows, Leah said immediately. Claire knows. I can see her house from my window. She's pacing in her living room. Been on her phone for the last 20 minutes. Marcus, she looks panicked. Good, I said, and I meant it. Dylan's car just pulled up. And Bryce's truck. Emergency family meeting, probably. Even better. This is the most entertainment I've had in years. Thank you for this gift. 10:17 a.m. A text from a number I recognized. Claire. Finally. We need to talk. I stared at those 4 words. We need to talk. The same phrase she'd used before kicking me out. The same phrase that had started this whole disaster. And now she wanted to talk. Now, when the story was out there, when the world knew, when her narrative had collapsed like a house of cards in a windstorm. I didn't respond. Not yet. Let her wait. Let her wonder. Let her feel a fraction of what I'd felt when she'd stood in our living room and called me a burden. 10:33 a.m. Another text from Claire. Marcus, please. This is important. 10:41 a.m. We had no idea about the deal. You should have told us. Should have told them. That was rich. I should have told them about my success so they could what? Not kick me out. Treat me better? Benefit from my good fortune? The entitlement was astounding. 11:02 a.m. A text from Dylan. Dude, congrats on the deal. Seriously impressive. We should celebrate. Celebrate. The same guy who'd packed my clothes into garbage bags wanted to celebrate. The cognitive dissonance was giving me whiplash. 11:15 a.m. Bryce texted. Bro, just saw the news. That's insane. 8 million? Holy shit. We need to catch up. They were coming out of the woodwork now. All of them. Suddenly interested, suddenly congratulatory, suddenly wanting to reconnect. Where was this energy when I was sitting in my wheelchair watching them stuff my life into trash bags? Where was this enthusiasm when Claire was calling me a burden? I left all their messages on read. Let them see I'd seen them. Let them know I was deliberately not responding. Let them stew in it. 12:47 p.m. The press release had been live for almost 5 hours, and the internet was still going wild. Hashtag Burden No More had evolved beyond my story into a whole disability rights conversation. People were sharing their own stories of being underestimated, dismissed, written off. It was honestly incredible and humbling and a little overwhelming. 1:23 p.m. Another text from Claire. Marcus, please call me. We need to discuss this situation. Situation. She called my success a situation. Like it was a problem to be managed rather than an achievement to be celebrated. That told me everything I needed to know about what she really wanted from this conversation. I finally responded, keeping it simple. I'm busy preparing for my TV appearance tomorrow. We can talk after that. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. She was typing and deleting, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, can we at least talk before you go on national television? No. One word. Simple, direct, final. The same energy she'd given me when she decided I needed to leave. The dots appeared again, then stopped. No response. Good. I set my phone face down on the counter and looked around my penthouse. The afternoon sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making everything look like it was glowing. My new suits were hanging in the closet, ready for tomorrow. My wheelchair was parked nearby, looking less like a medical device and more like just another piece of furniture in my life. Tomorrow, I'd go on national television. I'd tell my story, the real story, not Claire's sanitized version. And the world would see that the guy who'd been called a burden had actually been the one carrying the weight all along. But today I was just going to sit here, watch the notifications roll in, and enjoy the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guy wins. Even if he has to do it from a wheelchair. Monday morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. for my 6:30 a.m. Good Morning America appearance. The GMA team had sent a car, another accessible van, because apparently that's just how I roll now. And I arrived at the studio in Midtown feeling surprisingly calm. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that after everything I'd been through, a TV interview felt like the easiest thing in the world. The green room had good coffee, at least. The producer, a woman named Ashley who talked at approximately 800 words per minute, ran through the segment plan while a makeup artist made me camera ready, which apparently meant making me look like myself, but slightly more orange. We're doing a 7-minute segment, Ashley explained. Robin will ask about the acquisition, your recovery, your new role. Keep it inspiring but authentic. America loves a comeback story, and you're basically the poster child right now. No pressure, I said. Oh, tons of pressure. But you'll be great. Just be yourself. Well, your best self. Your TV self. At 6:27 a.m., I was wheeled onto the set. The lights were absurdly bright. Robin Roberts greeted me warmly, and I could tell immediately why she was good at her job. She made you feel like you were just having coffee with a friend, not talking to millions of people. The interview went exactly as planned. She asked about safety first, about the accident, about the irony of a safety equipment CEO being injured. I kept it light, self-deprecating. Turns out even the experts aren't immune to gravity, I said, and the studio crew laughed. Then she asked about recovery, and I saw my opening. The interesting thing about facing a setback like this, I said, looking directly at the camera, is you find out who's really in your corner. Some people see a challenge and step up. Others see a burden and step back. Sometimes being thrown away is the push you need to roll forward. Robin's eyebrows raised slightly. She knew there was a story there, but she was too professional to pry on live TV. Instead, she pivoted to Global Shield, to innovation, to the future. We talked about workplace safety, about accessibility, about turning adversity into opportunity. The segment ended with footage from the Global Shield facility, me touring the labs, talking with engineers, looking every bit the director of safety innovation I now was. As the camera cut away, Robin squeezed my hand. "That was perfect," she whispered. By the time I got back to my apartment at 9 a.m., #BurdenNoMore was trending nationwide. Someone had clipped my thrown-away quote and turned it into what the internet calls a moment. The memes were multiplying. News outlets were picking up the story. My phone had approximately 6,000 notifications. And sitting in my voicemail was a message from Claire. "We need to talk. Today. Please." I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Game, set, match. That afternoon, my building's security called. "Mr. Hall, your wife and her brothers are here. Should I send them up?" I chuckled. "Send the fan club up." When my apartment door opened, Claire's face was priceless. Her eyes swept over the marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the adaptive technology that made my wheelchair look like it belonged in a luxury showroom rather than a hospital. Dylan and Bryce shuffled behind her, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "You could have told us about the deal," Dylan said, breaking the silence. I raised an eyebrow. "Would that have stopped you from dragging my coffee machine to the driveway?" Claire stepped forward, her voice softening into what I recognized as her manipulation mode. "We can fix this, Marcus. Come home. We'll make the guest room accessible. We made a mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted. "You call me a burden. You packed my life into garbage bags. You told the neighborhood I was at a special facility while throwing barbecues at my house." "Our house," she corrected automatically, then seemed to realize that wasn't helping. I gestured at the skyline behind me. "I already have an accessible home. I just upgraded from motel betrayal to suite independence. Penthouse floor, if you're keeping track." Bryce was staring at my kitchen like he'd never seen granite countertops before. They left 20 minutes later, clutching a brochure for the foundation I'd started for injured workers. "Donations welcome," I'd said with a wink. Claire's face had gone through about 17 different expressions, none of them good. As the door closed behind them, my phone buzzed. The Global Shield CEO, applications for our safety program were flooding in after the GMA interview. Partnerships, speaking requests. Everything was exploding in the best possible way. I rolled to the balcony, looking down at Claire and her brothers shuffling toward their car like kids who'd just been sent to the principal's office. They looked smaller from up here, less significant. Dylan kept glancing back at the building like he couldn't quite process what had happened. Bryce was on his phone, probably Googling how much do penthouses cost, because subtlety wasn't his strong suit. They'd thrown me out thinking they were ridding themselves of a burden. They'd only freed me to build an empire. Sometimes being evicted is just a relocation notice from fate, with a better view. I raised my coffee mug toward the window in a private toast. To new beginnings. To revenge served cold. To proving that wheelchairs don't hold you back, small-minded people do. And I was done with small-minded people. The city stretched out before me, full of possibilities. Time to roll forward. My dad ordered me to attend my golden brother's wedding after he stole my fiancée. Threatening to cancel my tuition payments, he had no idea I secretly graduated valedictorian, married a beautiful wife, and made 6 figures. Just before the ceremony, I calmly handed him an envelope when he opened it. "My name's Miles Turner. I'm 25 years old, a certified environmental engineer with a license that actually means something, a husband to a woman way out of my league, and apparently, according to the family newsletter that nobody asked for, the official disappointment of the Turner bloodline. You know that kid in every family who doesn't quite fit the mold? The one who asks too many questions, challenges the status quo, and has the audacity to think for himself? Yeah, that's me. I'm the black sheep, except I've got a degree, a salary, and a functioning moral compass, which apparently makes me the weird one. It was a Tuesday morning, because of course it was a Tuesday. Nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. When my phone started vibrating across my nightstand like it was possessed by the ghost of bad news. I rolled over, squinted at the screen through one half-opened eye, and saw the name that makes my blood pressure spike faster than a Red Bull chugging contest. Dad. Raymond Turner. The man, the myth, the legend in his own mind. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity killed the cat, and I've always been more of a dog person anyway, so I answered. Big mistake. Huge. The kind of mistake you make when you're still half asleep and your brain hasn't fully loaded yet. You'll attend your brother's wedding whether you like it or not, Miles. His voice came through the speaker like a drill sergeant who'd just discovered his coffee was decaf. All booming authority and zero room for negotiation. No good morning. No how are you. Not even a hey, son, hope you're not dead. Just straight to the threats, because that's how we do family bonding in the Turner household. Miss it, and I'll stop paying your tuition. He delivered that line like it was checkmate, like he'd just played the ace up his sleeve and I was supposed to crumble into obedient submission. I could practically hear the smug satisfaction dripping through the phone, that tone he gets when he thinks he's won, when he believes he's still pulling the strings on my life, like I'm some kind of marionette in his personal puppet show. Here's the thing, though, and this is where it gets really beautiful. That threat was about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. Cute, really. Adorable, even. The man thought he still had leverage, thought he could still dangle financial security over my head like a carrot in front of a donkey. What he didn't know, what he had absolutely no clue about because I'd never bothered to enlighten him, was that I'd graduated 6 months earlier. Not just graduated, mind you, valedictorian, top of my class. The whole cap and gown ceremony, the handshakes, the diploma with fancy calligraphy that's currently sitting in a frame on my office wall. I just never told him. Why would I? The man had spent the better part of my adult life using my education as a leash, yanking it whenever I stepped out of line, reminding me that his money meant his rules. So when I finally crossed that finish line, when I finally earned that degree that he thought gave him ownership over my choices, I decided to keep that little gem to myself. Call it petty, call it vindictive, call it whatever you want. I call it strategic silence. See, while dear old dad was still operating under the delusion that I was some broke college student surviving on ramen noodles and parental guilt trips, I was actually living a completely different life. A better life. A life that didn't require his permission slip or his checkbook. I'd landed a job at Thornway Environmental Systems right out of school, and not some entry-level grunt position either. I was pulling in 6 figures. Yes, you read that right. 6 actual figures with commas and everything, designing clean energy systems in Portland. The kind of work that actually matters, that makes a difference, that doesn't involve sitting in some soul-crushing cubicle pushing papers for a corporation that views human beings as expendable resources. I was doing something meaningful, getting paid well for it, and sleeping like a baby at night knowing I wasn't destroying the planet in the process. And speaking of sleeping, I was doing that next to Clara, my wife, who is quite possibly the smartest person I've ever met and definitely smarter than I am, though I'd never admit that to her face because she'd never let me hear the end of it. She's the kind of woman who can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes, quote obscure philosophy, and somehow find my sarcasm charming instead of exhausting. Or at least she pretends to find it charming, which is close enough for marriage. We'd gotten married in a small ceremony that my family didn't know about because, honestly, why would I invite people who'd spend the whole reception making passive-aggressive comments about my life choices? Clara understood. She got it. She'd met them once and immediately said, "Your family is like a reality TV show, except nobody's getting paid and everyone's miserable." I married her 3 months later. But back to the phone call from hell. Dad was still ranting about family obligations and respect and tradition, all those buzzwords that people use when they want you to do something you don't want to do. The brother he was referring to, the one getting married, was Blake Turner. Blake, the golden child, the favorite son, the guy who could literally set fire to an orphanage and somehow Dad would spin it as showing initiative or being passionate about urban renewal. Blake had been the star of every family dinner, every holiday card, every conversation where Dad needed to brag to his golf buddies about his successful offspring. Blake was the one who could do no wrong, even when he was doing everything wrong. And here's the kicker, the real cherry on top of this disaster Sunday. Blake was marrying Lucy. My Lucy. Well, former Lucy. Ex-Lucy. The woman who used to be my fiancée until about a year ago when she decided that Blake's trust fund and flashy lifestyle were more appealing than my middle-class stability and actual moral fiber. Lucy, who once laid in bed with me at 3 in the morning talking about our future, planning out our lives, saying we'd name our kids after planets. Jupiter, Venus, maybe Neptune if we were feeling ambitious. Lucy, who wore my grandmother's ring and promised forever, right up until she decided that forever was negotiable if the price was right. Blake had swooped in like a hawk spotting a field mouse. All charm and expensive cologne, and Lucy had practically thrown herself at him. The betrayal was so cliché it hurt. Your brother stealing your fiancé? That's some soap opera nonsense, some Jerry Springer episode waiting to happen. But it happened. It was real. And now they were getting married. And I was expected to smile. Expected to show up and play nice. Expected to pretend like my chest wasn't full of betrayal and my pride wasn't still nursing its wounds. Sure, Dad. I said into the phone, my voice dripping with enough sarcasm to corrode metal. Let me just iron my clown suit. Should I bring the red nose, or is Blake already wearing that? He sputtered something about respect and maturity, but I'd already mentally checked out. I was thinking about that envelope sitting on my desk in my home office, the one I'd been preparing for weeks. A simple white envelope, business-sized, but heavy. Heavy with meaning, heavy with symbolism, heavy with the exact amount of money that Dad had ever actually spent on me. One semester's tuition, $11,940. I'd done the math, gone through old bank statements, calculated every dollar he'd ever used as ammunition against me. That was it. One semester. The rest I'd covered with scholarships, grants, and student loans that I'd paid off myself. But that one semester was his golden ticket, his claim to ownership, his justification for every command and every threat. I'd gotten that cashier's check printed up 2 weeks earlier, and every time I looked at it, I felt a little thrill of anticipation. This wedding, this circus, this absolute train wreck of an event, it was going to be my stage. My moment. The day I handed that check to Dad and watched his face realize that he had zero control over me anymore. No more threats. No more leverage. No more puppet strings. Just a grown man telling his father exactly where he could shove his conditional love and his manipulative parenting tactics. I was going to that wedding, all right. Not because I was expected to, not because I was threatened into it, but because I had a front row seat to my own liberation and I wasn't about to miss the show. Blake and Lucy could have their fairy tale wedding, could have their champagne toasts and their first dance, and their happily ever after built on lies and betrayal. I'd be there, smiling my most charming smile, waiting for the perfect moment to drop my bomb and walk away from the Turner family drama once and for all. Let the circus begin. Blake's wedding was scheduled at the Rosewood Estate, because of course it was. When you're the golden child marrying your brother's ex-fiancée, you don't settle for some normal venue like a church or a hotel ballroom. No, you go full Gatsby and book the most pretentious, over-the-top location you can find, the kind of place where the chandeliers probably cost more than my first car. And my first car was a pretty decent Honda Civic that got me through college without spontaneously combusting, so that's saying something. The Rosewood Estate was one of those places you see in magazines, where rich people go to feel even richer, where every detail is meticulously designed to scream, "We have money, and we want everyone to know it." Marble floors, gold-trimmed everything, gardens that probably required a team of 12 gardeners working around the clock, and those massive crystal chandeliers hanging from ceilings so high you'd need oxygen tanks to change the bulbs. It was the kind of venue that made you feel poor just by looking at the pictures online. The family group chat had been absolutely buzzing for weeks leading up to the big day, and I mean buzzing like a hive of caffeinated bees who'd just discovered Red Bull. Every single day, multiple times a day, my phone would light up with notifications that I desperately wanted to mute, but couldn't, because then I'd miss the entertainment value of watching my family lose their collective minds over floral arrangements and seating charts. Mom was in there crying happy tears through text messages, using way too many emojis for a woman in her 50s. Like, "We get it, you're excited, but did you really need to send 17 crying laughing faces followed by 8 heart eye emojis?" Blake was sending shirtless tuxedo selfies, because apparently that's a thing now, showing off his spray tan and his gym membership like he was auditioning for some reality show about insufferable people getting married. Trying on the tux. Can't wait for the big day. with a flexing arm emoji, because subtlety died somewhere around 2015 and nobody bothered to send flowers. And then there was Dad, bragging to literally anyone who would listen, and probably several people who wouldn't, about raising 2 accomplished sons. 2 accomplished sons, plural. As if I was somehow part of his success story, as if my achievements were a reflection of his parenting rather than happening in spite of it. He'd screenshot articles about Blake's latest business venture, which, by the way, was some sketchy crypto investment thing that sounded like a pyramid scheme wearing an expensive suit, and post them in the group chat with captions like, "So proud of my boys." Meanwhile, I'd actually been featured in a legitimate engineering journal 3 months earlier for my work on sustainable water systems, and he hadn't said a word about it. Probably didn't even read it. Probably didn't even know it existed. But Blake posts a picture of himself holding a glass of champagne on a yacht he doesn't own, and suddenly Dad's writing paragraphs about the Turner legacy. I stayed quiet through all of it, just lurking in that group chat like a ghost haunting a conversation I wanted no part of. I'd be sitting in my actual house, the one I owned, with a mortgage I could afford, in a neighborhood where people said good morning and didn't judge you for mowing your lawn on Sundays, sipping my coffee and watching the circus unfold in real time. Clara would lean over my shoulder sometimes, reading the messages, and just shake her head in disbelief. "Your family is exhausting," she'd say, and I'd nod because what else could you say? They were exhausting. They were a reality TV show that nobody asked for, a never-ending drama where everyone was the hero of their own story, and I was apparently cast as the villain for having the audacity to live my own life. One morning, about a week before the wedding, Clara was leaning on our kitchen counter doing that thing she does where she looks at me with those eyes that see right through all my bullshit. She's got this way of reading me that's both comforting and terrifying, like she knows what I'm thinking before I even think it. "You're really going?" she asked, stirring her coffee with one of those fancy reusable metal straws she insisted we buy because plastic is destroying the oceans. She had a point, but that's beside the point right now. "Oh, absolutely," I said, taking a long sip of my own coffee, the kind that's probably too strong, but keeps me functional through the absurdity of daily life. Wouldn't want to miss the circus. I could see the corner of her mouth twitch, that little smile she gets when she knows I'm about to do something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, and with me, it's honestly a coin flip. She smirked, that beautiful, knowing smirk that made me fall in love with her in the first place. "Don't set anything on fire." "No promises," I replied, and I meant it. Not literally, of course. I'm not a pyromaniac. I'm just a guy with a flair for dramatic gestures and a deep appreciation for poetic justice. But metaphorically? Oh, I was absolutely planning to set something on fire. Specifically, I was planning to set fire to Dad's last remaining thread of control over my life, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching it burn. The envelope was sitting on my desk in the home office, right where I'd left it for the past 2 weeks, calling to me like the One Ring calling to Frodo. Simple, white, business-sized, the kind of envelope you'd use to mail a birthday card or a wedding invitation, but this one was heavy. Not physically heavy. It was just paper, after all, but heavy with meaning, with symbolism, with the weight of everything it represented. Inside that envelope was a cashier's check for exactly $11,940. I'd gone to the bank myself, stood in line like a regular person, and requested it in that specific amount. The teller had looked at me funny, probably wondering why anyone would need a cashier's check for such a random number. But she processed it without asking questions because that's what bank tellers do. They judge you silently and take your money. That number wasn't random, though. It was calculated, precise. It was the exact amount that Dad had ever spent on my education. 1 semester's tuition at the state university I'd attended. 1 semester. For months. 16 weeks. That was the sum total of his financial investment in my future, the grand total of his parental contribution to my success. Everything else, the other 7 semesters, the books, the housing, the food, the gas money, the late-night pizza study sessions, the emergency car repairs, the graduation fees, all of it came from somewhere else. Scholarships I'd earned by actually studying. Grants I'd applied for by filling out endless forms at 2 in the morning. Student loans I'd taken out and paid back myself with interest that would make a loan shark blush. Part-time jobs where I slung coffee and smiled at rude customers and pretended my feet didn't hurt. Summer internships where I worked 60-hour weeks for experience and barely enough money to cover rent. But that one semester? That was Dad's. That was his golden ticket, his trump card, his "I own you because I paid for your education" card that he played every single time I stepped out of line or disagreed with him or dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, I was an adult capable of making my own decisions. Every argument, every disagreement, every time I didn't jump when he said jump, he'd pull out that same tired line. "After everything I've done for you, after I paid for your college." Like that one semester was supposed to buy him lifetime ownership of my choices, my career, my entire existence. Well, guess what, Dad? I was buying myself back. That check was my freedom, printed in neat blue ink on fancy bank paper with watermarks and security features. It was my liberation, my emancipation, my declaration of independence all rolled into one rectangular piece of paper. At that wedding, at Blake's ridiculous, over-the-top, chandeliers and champagne circus, I was planning to hand that envelope over like a plot twist in a movie that nobody saw coming. I'd walk right up to him, probably during some moment when he was holding court with his country club friends, bragging about his sons and his legacy and whatever other nonsense he filled his days with, and I'd hand him that envelope with a smile. I could picture it perfectly, the confusion on his face when he opened it, the way his expression would shift from puzzlement to understanding to rage as he realized what he was holding. The check made out to Raymond Turner, with tuition reimbursement written in the memo line, because I wanted there to be absolutely no confusion about what this was. This wasn't a gift. This wasn't gratitude. This was me settling a debt, closing an account, severing the last financial tie that bound us together. After this, he couldn't threaten me anymore, couldn't hold anything over my head, couldn't use money as a weapon or love as a bargaining chip. I'd be free, completely, utterly, gloriously free. Clara caught me staring at the envelope again that morning, lost in my thoughts about the impending showdown. "You're thinking about it again," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "Thinking about what?" I asked innocently, even though we both knew exactly what. "About the look on his face when you hand him that check." I grinned. "Maybe. Possibly. Fine. Yes, I'm absolutely thinking about it. I've thought about nothing else for 2 weeks. I've played it out in my head like 1,000 times, with different lighting and background music and everything." She laughed, that genuine laugh that made everything worthwhile. "You're ridiculous. I'm free," I corrected her. "Or at least I will be in a few days. Just need to get through one wedding, execute one perfectly timed dramatic gesture, and then I never have to care about their approval again." She walked over and kissed my forehead, something she did when she thought I was being simultaneously sweet and insane. "Just remember, you're better than all this drama." "I know," I said, "but being better doesn't mean I can't enjoy a little poetic justice on my way out." The wedding was in 3 days. 3 more days until Blake's circus. 3 more days until my freedom. I was counting down like a kid before Christmas, except instead of presents under a tree, I was getting something better, the chance to finally, definitively, permanently tell my father that he no longer had any power over me. And that, my friends, was going to be better than any gift I'd ever received. When I showed up at the Rosewood estate, fashionably late by design, and carrying an envelope that felt like it weighed about 1,000 pounds despite being just paper, heads turned like I'd walked in with a live grenade strapped to my chest. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a couple of Teslas because of course there were Teslas, and one obnoxious Maserati that I knew belonged to Blake, because he'd posted about 17 pictures of it on Instagram with captions about living the dream and grinding pays off. I pulled up in my sensible Subaru Outback, the kind of car that says, "I'm an adult with priorities and I don't need to compensate for anything." And I could practically feel the judgment radiating from the valet attendants who were probably wondering if I'd taken a wrong turn on my way to a camping trip. The estate itself was even more ridiculous in person than it had looked in the pictures. We're talking full-on Great Gatsby vibes, except everyone was alive and significantly less interesting than the characters in that book. There were white roses everywhere, and I mean everywhere, like someone had gone absolutely nuclear with the floral budget, and string lights hanging from trees that probably cost more to rent than my monthly mortgage payment. A fountain in the courtyard was shooting water like it was celebrating something, though I wasn't sure what. Blake's ego finally becoming visible to the naked eye? Lucy's ability to trade up for a bigger bank account? The death of my faith in humanity? Take your pick. I walked through the massive front doors, past the marble columns that screamed, "We have money and taste," but mostly money, and into the reception area where the pre-ceremony cocktail hour was in full swing. The place was packed with people I didn't know and didn't care to know, all dressed in their finest expensive clothes, holding champagne glasses and laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny but sounded sophisticated. Classical music was playing from speakers hidden somewhere in the ceiling, the kind of music that makes you feel like you should be discussing philosophy or the stock market instead of contemplating how quickly you could escape out the back door. That's when I saw her. Mom. Standing near the grand staircase in a dress that probably cost more than my wedding. You know, the small, intimate ceremony she didn't know about because I didn't invite her. And her face did this thing that I can only describe as a smile, trying desperately to break through layers of Botox and social conditioning. Her eyes went wide when she spotted me, like she couldn't quite believe I'd actually shown up. Like maybe she thought I'd chicken out or come to my senses and realize that subjecting myself to this circus was a form of voluntary torture. Miles, you came. She rushed over, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer to awkwardness. Her smile was so forced I was worried her face might actually crack, and considering the amount of cosmetic work she'd clearly had done since I last saw her, that was a legitimate concern. She hugged me in that way that mothers do when they're trying to seem affectionate, but are actually just checking if you're wearing something appropriate and not planning to embarrass them. Yep, here I am, I said, returning the hug with the bare minimum effort required to not seem like a complete sociopath. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The sarcasm in my voice was thick enough to cut with a knife, but she either didn't notice or chose to ignore it, which honestly could go either way with her. Before I could extricate myself from her perfume cloud, seriously, whatever she was wearing could probably be detected from space. That appeared like a storm cloud rolling in to ruin a perfectly mediocre day. Raymond Turner, in all his stern, disapproving glory, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a glove and an expression that suggested he'd just bitten into a lemon. His eyes locked onto me with that look, the one I'd seen my entire life. The one that said, "You're disappointing me just by existing, but I'm going to pretend to be civil because we're in public." "You're late," he said. Not hello, not good to see you, not even thanks for coming. Just an immediate criticism, because that's how we do greetings in the Turner family. We skip the pleasantries and go straight for the jugular. "Traffic," I replied smoothly, though there hadn't been any traffic. "Conscience, same thing. You know how it is when you're debating whether to attend your brother's wedding to your ex-fiancée. Really makes you stop and think at every red light." I smiled, the kind of smile that looks friendly to observers, but is actually just weaponized politeness. His jaw tightened, and I could see him doing mental calculations about whether it was worth causing a scene in front of his country club buddies who were no doubt watching this interaction with the kind of fascination people reserve for car crashes and reality TV. He decided against it, which was probably the smartest decision he'd made all year. That's when I spotted Lucy across the room, standing near the bar in her bridesmaid dress. Or maybe it was her pre-wedding dress, I don't know. Weddings have like 17 different dress codes now, and I can't keep track. And our eyes met. For a second, maybe half a second, I saw something flash across her face. Guilt? Regret? Indigestion from the shrimp cocktail? Hard to say. Her eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost, except the ghost was her ex-fiancé showing up to watch her marry his brother, which is honestly more horrifying than any actual ghost could ever be. I raised my glass, which I'd grabbed from a passing waiter specifically for this moment, and gave her the most charming, threatening smile I could muster. It was the kind of smile that said, "I'm fine, everything's fine, we're all fine here," while simultaneously implying that maybe nothing was fine and chaos could erupt at any moment. Schrodinger's smile, if you will. "Relax," I mouthed across the room, making sure she could see every word. "I'm not here to object, probably." The probably was important. It left just enough uncertainty to keep things interesting, just enough doubt to make her wonder if I was going to pull some dramatic movie stunt during the speak now or forever hold your peace part. Which, for the record, I wasn't planning to do, because that would be tacky and I have some dignity left. But she didn't need to know that. Lucy's face went from pale to basically translucent, and she grabbed her champagne glass like it was a life preserver, and she was drowning in a sea of bad decisions. Good. Let her squirm a little. Let her spend the whole ceremony wondering if I was going to say something. Let her question every choice that led to this moment. I'm petty enough to enjoy that, and I'm self-aware enough to admit it. Blake was holding court near the main entrance, because of course he was. Blake never just existed in a room. He commanded attention like a B-list celebrity who thought he was A-list. He was surrounded by his groomsmen, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a cologne commercial, all sharp suits and styled hair, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences for anything. And he was laughing too loud at something that probably wasn't that funny. When he saw me, his laugh kind of stuttered, like a car engine trying to turn over, and I watched him do a literal double take. The man's confidence flickered like a faulty light bulb. But Blake being Blake, he recovered quickly, strutting over in his designer tuxedo that probably cost more than my entire wedding wardrobe, radiating that special kind of entitlement that only comes from being told you're special your entire life, without ever having to prove it. He looked like a man who'd never been told no in any meaningful way, like someone who thought the world existed to applaud his every move. His spray tan was so perfect it looked airbrushed, his hair was gelled within an inch of its life, and his smile was so white I was half expecting it to glow in the dark. Miles, glad you could make it, bro. He went in for one of those bro hugs that guys do when they want to seem friendly but don't actually like each other, all back-patting and performative masculinity. I returned it with the enthusiasm of someone hugging a cactus. Wouldn't miss it, I said, pulling back and giving him my best shit-eating grin. It's not every day your brother marries your ex-fiancée. Real Hallmark movie material here. They'll probably make a Christmas special about it. His smile tightened just a fraction, just enough for me to know I'd landed that hit exactly where I wanted it. Hey man, water under the bridge, right? We're all adults here. Oh, absolutely. I agreed, nodding like I was the most reasonable person in the world. Super mature. Very adult. Nothing weird about this situation at all. Just a normal family gathering where everyone's made peace with the past, and definitely nobody's carrying around an envelope full of symbolic meaning. Okay, that last part might have been too specific, but I couldn't help myself. Dad started making his rounds, playing the proud patriarch, introducing Blake to various guests like he was presenting a prize stallion at a county fair. This is my son Blake, my pride and joy, he'd say, gesturing to my brother like he'd personally crafted him from marble and excellence. And every single time, my hand would shoot up from wherever I was standing in the room. And I'm the receipt they forgot to keep. I called out cheerfully, loud enough for people to hear, but casual enough to play it off as a joke. The crowd laughed, some of them genuinely, some of them nervously, all of them probably wondering what family drama they'd accidentally walked into. Dad, however, did not laugh. His face did this thing where it turned sort of purple-red, like a sunset but angrier, and I could see a vein pulsing in his temple that I was pretty sure wasn't there before. Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging in just slightly. Miles, please, she whispered urgently, her smile never wavering because appearances matter more than honesty in her world. Not here. Not today. What? I asked innocently, spreading my hands like I had no idea what she was talking about. I'm just participating in the festivities. Being present. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to be here. The moment was absolutely delicious. Better than the overpriced appetizers they were serving, better than the champagne that probably cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. This was the appetizer to my main course, the opening act to my grand finale. I was here, I was present, and I was armed with an envelope that was going to change everything. Let the games begin. I turned to walk away from the wreckage I'd just created, feeling like an action hero walking away from an explosion in slow motion. Except instead of fire and debris, it was family dysfunction and a cashier's check. My feet carried me across that ridiculously expensive marble floor with a confidence I'd never felt before in my entire life, each step echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the pre-ceremony area. It was glorious. It was liberating. It was exactly what I'd been fantasizing about for months, and somehow the reality was even better than the daydream. The weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for 25 years had just evaporated into thin air, and I felt like I could probably fly if I really put my mind to it. But of course, Dad wasn't about to let me have my triumphant exit without trying to reassert some semblance of control, because that's not how Raymond Turner operates. The man doesn't know when to quit, doesn't understand the concept of strategic retreat, doesn't recognize when he's been checkmated. His voice boomed across the room like thunder, loud enough to make several guests jump and one elderly woman clutch her chest in surprise. "Get back here, Miles." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered in that tone he probably used when he was telling his employees to work overtime or demanding that a waiter comp his meal because the steak wasn't cooked exactly to his specifications. I paused, turning my head just slightly so he could see my profile, giving him the most casual glance over my shoulder like he was a stranger asking for directions and not my father having a very public meltdown. "Sorry, can't," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, because if we were doing this, we were going to do it with an audience. Privacy had left the building approximately 10 minutes ago and wasn't coming back. I promised myself I wouldn't attend weddings where the groom once borrowed my Netflix password and never gave it back. Also, the whole stealing my fiancé thing. That's kind of a deal breaker too. But mostly the Netflix thing. That's just rude. The Netflix line got a few suppressed laughs from the crowd. Those little snort giggles that people make when something's funny, but they're not sure if they're allowed to laugh. Some woman in a purple dress actually had to cover her mouth to hide her smile, and I mentally sent her a thank you for appreciating my comedy in this moment of high drama. Dad's face went from angry red to apocalyptic purple, a color palette that suggested his blood pressure was probably doing things that would make a cardiologist deeply concerned. As I continued my march toward the exit, I could hear the ceremony music starting to play in the background, that soft romantic classical stuff that's supposed to make people feel all warm and fuzzy about love and commitment. The string quartet had switched from the ambient cocktail hour music to something more purposeful, more wedding-wide, probably signaling that everyone should take their seats and prepare for the main event. It was perfect timing, really. Poetic, even. Here they were, about to begin their ceremony celebrating eternal love and partnership, and here I was, making my grand exit from their lives forever. If I'd been a movie director, I couldn't have choreographed it better. Mom had abandoned her post near the staircase and was power walking toward me in her heels, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years. Her face a mixture of panic and fury and embarrassment all rolled into one expression that would be almost impressive if it wasn't directed at me. She caught up to me near the massive front doors, her hand reaching out to grab my arm with surprising strength for someone who claimed yoga was her only form of exercise. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed, her voice low and urgent, trying to keep this between us even though approximately 50 people were watching this unfold like it was the best reality TV show they'd seen in years. I stopped, turned to face her fully, and gave her my most sincere smile, the one I usually reserved for when I was explaining environmental impact assessments to clients who didn't actually care about the environment. "Just continuing the family tradition," I said sweetly. "I learned from the best, after all. You guys have been embarrassing me my whole life. Thought I'd return the favor. Consider it my wedding gift to Blake. Something memorable, Years from now, when people talk about this wedding, they won't remember the flowers or the cake or the vows. They'll remember the time his brother showed up, paid his dad back, and peaced out. That's the stuff of legend, Mom. That's the kind of story that gets told at future family gatherings, which I won't be attending, but still." Her grip tightened on my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging in just slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to make a point. "Your father is furious," she said, like this was news, like I hadn't just witnessed his face go through the entire visible light spectrum in the span of 5 minutes. "You can't just leave. What will people think?" "Oh, I don't know." I mused, pretending to consider this deeply. "Maybe they'll think that I'm a guy with self-respect who doesn't stick around to watch his brother marry his ex-fiancée. Maybe they'll think I'm someone who doesn't let family obligations trap him in toxic situations. Or maybe, and here's a wild thought, maybe I don't actually care what they think, because none of these people matter to me, and their opinions have exactly zero impact on my life." Shocking concept, I know. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "I'm leaving, Mom. You can either make a bigger scene by trying to stop me, or you can let me go and salvage what's left of your dignity. Your choice." She opened her mouth to say something else, Probably something about duty or family loyalty or how I was breaking her heart. All those greatest hits that parents play when their guilt trips aren't working. But before she could launch into her monologue, I was already moving again, pushing through those massive front doors and stepping out into the afternoon sunlight that felt like freedom and vindication and the beginning of something new. The parking lot was still full of those luxury cars, still radiating wealth and status, and all those things that people pretend matter when they're trying to impress each other. I spotted my Subaru exactly where I'd left it, looking wonderfully ordinary and practical among all that automotive excess, and I'd never been happier to see a car in my entire life. But what made the moment absolutely perfect was the sight of Clara sitting in the driver's seat, engine already running, sunglasses on like she was my getaway driver in the world's most suburban heist, holding 2 iced lattes from that coffee shop we loved, the one that knew how we liked our drinks without us having to say it. She saw me coming and smiled. That beautiful smile that made me fall in love with her in the first place. The one that said, "I know exactly who you are and I love you anyway. You magnificent disaster of a human being." I opened the passenger door and slid into the seat, the familiar comfort of my own car feeling like a warm hug after being in that pretentious estate for the past hour. The air conditioning was on. The radio was playing something indie and alternative that Clara loved, and the iced latte in the cup holder had my name written on it in Sharpie with a little heart next to it. "How'd it go?" Clara asked, putting the car in reverse before I'd even fully closed the door, because she knew me well enough to know that we needed to exit stage left immediately, before anyone could follow me out and try to continue the drama in the parking lot. She was already navigating us out of there with the efficiency of someone who'd planned our escape route, which, knowing Clara, she probably had. "They'll be talking about it for decades," I said, buckling my seatbelt and picking up the iced latte, taking that first sip that tasted like coffee and victory and the rest of my life. Absolutely decades. I'm talking, remember that time Miles showed up and burned every bridge in the vicinity, levels of memorable. Future anthropologists will study this moment. Historians will write papers about it. Shakespeare would have written a play about it, except it would have been way more dramatic and probably someone would have died. She grinned, that mischievous grin that suggested she was just as entertained by this whole situation as I was. "Did you hand him the check?" She already knew the answer. We'd planned this together, rehearsed the general idea if not the exact words, but she wanted to hear about it, wanted the play-by-play of how it went down. "Yup," I confirmed, settling back into the seat and watching the Rosewood estate get smaller in the side mirror, that massive pretentious building shrinking until it was just another structure in the distance, meaningless and forgettable. Right there in front of his golf buddies and half the wedding guests. His blood pressure spiked like a stock market bubble right before a crash. It was beautiful, Clara. Truly beautiful. I wish I'd filmed it, except that would have been tacky, and I was going for classy rebellion, not viral video scandal. Clara laughed, that genuine full-body laugh that made her snort slightly, which she always tried to hide, but I found adorable. "I'm so proud of you," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand while keeping her other hand on the wheel, expertly navigating us away from the scene of my greatest triumph. That took guts. Real, burning your ships after landing on the beach energy. No going back now. No going back, I agreed, squeezing her hand in return. And honestly, I don't want to go back. Not even a little bit. That whole world back there, that whole toxic mess of obligation and guilt and conditional love. I'm done with it. Finished. Over. I've graduated from the school of family dysfunction, and I'm never going back for a reunion. I took another sip of my latte, savoring both the caffeine and the moment. "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" Clara asked, glancing over at me with curiosity and affection in her eyes. "I don't feel guilty," I said, realizing it as I said it, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. I thought I would. Thought maybe I'd get in the car and start second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd gone too far, feeling bad about embarrassing them in public. But I don't. I feel light. Free. Like I just put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years, and my shoulders can finally relax. "That's because you did the right thing," Clara said firmly, her voice carrying that certainty she had about things, that moral clarity that I envied and loved in equal measure. "You set a boundary. You claimed your independence. You refused to let them control you anymore. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to celebrate. We drove off into the afternoon, the music from the radio providing the perfect soundtrack for our freedom, some indie bands singing about new beginnings and leaving the past behind. The sun was shining, the coffee was cold and perfect, and somewhere behind us, Blake and Lucy were probably exchanging vows while my family tried to pretend that the previous 20 minutes hadn't happened. And me? I was driving toward my real life, the one I'd built without their permission or approval, with a woman who loved me for who I actually was, not who they wanted me to be. As exits go, it was pretty damn perfect. The following week, my phone looked like it was under some kind of coordinated digital assault, the kind of attack that would make a cybersecurity expert break out in a cold sweat. We're talking 17 missed calls from Mom. Yes, I counted, because at a certain point it becomes less about communication and more about documenting evidence of obsessive behavior. 32 text messages from Dad, ranging from angry demands that I call him back immediately to lengthy paragraphs about respect and family values and disappointment, each one more unhinged than the last. And then there was one single message from Blake, short and sweet, and absolutely dripping with victimhood. You ruined our wedding. I stared at that message for a good 30 seconds, sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, Clara reading the news on her tablet across from me, and I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no regret, no urge to apologize or make amends. Just a mild sense of amusement mixed with a tiny bit of satisfaction, like when you successfully assemble IKEA furniture without having any parts left over. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for maybe half a second before I typed out my response. Short and to the point and absolutely true. You ruined my engagement. We're even. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode because I had zero interest in whatever response that was going to generate. Clara glanced up from her tablet, one eyebrow raised in that way she had that meant she knew exactly what I'd just done. Texting Blake? She asked, though it wasn't really a question so much as a statement of fact. The woman could read me like a large print book written for elementary school students. Yup, I confirmed, taking a sip of my coffee and savoring both the caffeine and the moral high ground. Just reminding him that karma's not a concept, it's a lifestyle choice. He made his bed with my ex-fiancée, now he can lie in it. Literally. I paused. Though knowing Lucy's tendency to get cold at night and steal all the blankets, he's probably not lying in it very comfortably. Clara snorted into her coffee, nearly spilling it. You're terrible, she said, but she was smiling, that smile that told me she thought I was exactly the right amount of terrible. I'm honest, I corrected. There's a difference. A subtle but important difference. I set my phone face down on the table, creating a physical barrier between me and the family drama that was no doubt continuing to unfold in the digital realm. I'm done engaging with their circus. They can send all the texts and leave all the voicemails they want. I'm not responding. Radio silence. Complete communication blackout. I've said everything I needed to say with that check and my dramatic exit. Anything else would just be redundant. And I stuck to that. For the next few days, I focused on work with the kind of intensity that probably concerned my coworkers but impressed my boss. I threw myself into my job at Thornway Environmental Systems like a man possessed, or more accurately, like a man who'd just cut ties with his toxic family and needed to channel that energy somewhere productive. The office became my sanctuary, my refuge from the constant buzzing of my phone that I continued to ignore with the discipline of a Tibetan monk practicing meditation. My boss, Gretchen, was a woman in her 50s who'd been in the environmental engineering game since before I was born, with a no-nonsense attitude and a dark sense of humor that matched my own. She was the kind of boss who actually gave a damn about her employees while simultaneously not taking any crap from anyone, a rare combination that made her both respected and genuinely liked. She'd noticed my increased productivity, the way I was staying late and coming in early, the way I was tackling projects with renewed vigor. "You're bold, Turner," she said one afternoon, stopping by my desk where I was deep into calculations for a new water treatment system proposal. She was holding her ever-present coffee mug that said, "Save water, drink coffee," in faded letters, a gift from her daughter that she'd been using for years. "We need that energy for the city project. Whatever you're channeling, bottle it up and sell it because I want the whole team on that level." I looked up from my computer screen, pushing my glasses up my nose in that unconscious gesture I made when I'd been staring at numbers too long. What? Vengeance and coffee? I asked, gesturing to my own mug that was currently on its third refill of the day. Because that's pretty much my fuel source right now. That and spite. Mostly spite, if I'm being honest. Exactly, she said, pointing at me with her free hand like I'd just answered the million-dollar question. That's the kind of energy that changes the world. Or at least designs really good water systems. Same thing, really, in the grand scheme of things. She pulled up a chair, sitting down in that casual way that meant she wanted to have an actual conversation, not just a passing work exchange. Everything okay? You've been different this week. Good different, but different. I considered how much to tell her, weighing the pros and cons of mixing personal life with professional life. But then figured what the hell. Gretchen had always been straight with me. Might as well return the favor. Went to my brother's wedding last weekend, I said, leaning back in my chair. He married my ex-fiancée. I showed up, paid my dad back for every dollar he ever held over my head, told them all exactly what I thought, and left. Haven't spoken to any of them since. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about my life choices right now. Gretchen's eyes widened slightly, then she let out a low whistle. Damn, Turner, that's some bold moves. Your brother married your ex? That's some Jerry Springer-level family drama. Right, I said, appreciating her immediate understanding of how messed up the situation was. And my dad had been using my education as leverage, threatening to stop paying my tuition, which he wasn't actually paying anymore because I graduated 6 months ago, but he didn't know that. So I gave him a check for the one semester he did pay and basically told him he couldn't control me anymore. I like you even more now, Gretchen said, raising her coffee mug in a toast. That's the kind of spine we need around here. People who stand up for themselves, who don't let anyone push them around, not even family. Especially not family. Honestly, they're usually the worst offenders. She took a sip of her coffee. How's it feel? Liberating, I admitted, feeling the truth of it as I said it. Like I can finally breathe properly for the first time in years. Like someone removed a weight from my chest that I didn't even realize was there until it was gone. Work's been my therapy this week. Burying my stress in designing green water systems and writing sarcastic emails to contractors who think environmental regulations are suggestions. Well, keep it up, she said, standing up and preparing to head back to her office. Your work this week has been excellent. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Channel that energy into the city proposal. We've got a presentation next month, and I want you leading the environmental impact team. After she left, I sat there for a moment, processing what she'd said. Leading the environmental impact team on the city proposal was huge. It was the kind of opportunity that could really establish my career, that could put my name out there in the professional community, that could prove I was more than just some entry-level engineer still figuring things out. It was the kind of thing Dad would never believe I could do, which made it even more satisfying to pursue. That evening, as I was packing up to head home, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Against my better judgment, I glanced at it. Dad. Of course it was Dad. The subject line read, "We need to talk," in all caps, because apparently we're yelling even in email subject lines now. I hovered my finger over it for a second, debating whether to open it, whether to engage, whether to break my self-imposed communication blackout. I opened it, not because I cared what he had to say, but because I was curious how he'd try to spin this, how he'd attempt to regain control of the narrative. The email was exactly what I expected. A lengthy paragraph about how I was ungrateful, how I'd embarrassed the family, how I'd regret this decision, how family was supposed to stick together through everything, blah blah blah, greatest hits of manipulative parent rhetoric. It ended with, "You'll regret this, Miles. You'll see." I read it once, then read it again just to make sure I'd absorbed the full scope of the manipulation attempt. Then I hit reply and typed out exactly 7 words. Already regretted being born into your Wi-Fi plan. We're even. I added for good measure. P.S. Change your Netflix password. I've been using it for 3 years, and you never noticed. That's how much attention you actually pay. Okay, so maybe that was more than 7 words. Sue me. I was on a roll. I hit send before I could overthink it, then immediately logged out of my email and shut down my computer. That was it. That was my final communication with Dad. No more responses, no more engagement, no more giving him the satisfaction of getting under my skin. When I got home, Clara had already started making dinner. Pasta with that homemade sauce she made that was somehow better than any restaurant version I'd ever had. The kitchen smelled amazing, like garlic and tomatoes and herbs and home. She looked up when I walked in, immediately reading my expression with that supernatural ability she had. "You replied to your dad's email, didn't you?" she asked, stirring the sauce. "How did you?" "You know what? Never mind. I don't even question your psychic abilities anymore," I said, dropping my bag by the door and walking over to kiss her hello. "Yeah," I replied. Told him I already regretted being born into his Wi-Fi plan and that we're even. Also told him I've been using his Netflix password for 3 years. Clara burst out laughing, nearly dropping her wooden spoon. "You didn't." "I absolutely did," I confirmed, feeling zero regret about it. And you know what? It felt great. Not as great as handing him that check at the wedding, but pretty close. Like a victory lap after already winning the race. She shook her head, still smiling. "What am I going to do with you? Love me despite my pettiness?" I suggested, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. "Support my questionable but ultimately justified decisions? Continue being the best thing that ever happened to me?" "I can do that," she said, leaning back into me. "But seriously, you're done now, right? No more engaging with them? No more back and forth?" "Done," I promised. "Completely done. I've said everything I needed to say. Now I'm just going to focus on work, on us, on building the life we actually want instead of the one they tried to force on me. Gretchen wants me to lead the environmental impact team on that big city proposal." Clara turned in my arms, her face lighting up. "Miles, that's huge. That's amazing." "Yeah," I agreed, feeling genuine excitement about it for the first time. "Yeah, it really is." So while Blake and Lucy are figuring out their marriage and Dad's having a meltdown about losing control over me, I'm going to be over here actually accomplishing things. Living well, and all that. "Best revenge," Clara finished, kissing me. "Now come eat." I made enough pasta to feed an army because apparently I forgot how to cook for 2 people. We ate dinner talking about anything except my family, and it was perfect. A week later, I was sitting at my desk at Thornway, deep into reviewing environmental impact assessments for a new green water initiative, when my phone buzzed with a text from our receptionist downstairs. "Someone here to see you. Says he's your brother." I stared at that message for a solid 10 seconds, my brain trying to process why Blake would show up at my workplace unannounced, like we were in some kind of dramatic TV show where people have confrontations in office lobbies. This wasn't good. This had all the hallmarks of either a spectacular meltdown or an attempt at reconciliation that I had exactly zero interest in entertaining. I typed back, "Tell him I'm in a meeting." It was a lie, but a convenient one, the kind of social fiction that office environments were built on. But before I could hit send, I saw him. Through the glass walls of our modern, open-concept office space that I usually appreciated but currently cursed, I could see Blake stepping off the elevator, looking around like a lost puppy trying to find its way home. And honestly, that's exactly what he looked like, lost. Not the confident, swagger-filled golden boy I'd seen at the wedding. This was a different Blake entirely, one who looked like life had taken him behind the woodshed and explained some harsh truths about consequences. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, which for Blake was the equivalent of showing up in pajamas. The man lived in designer clothes and expensive accessories, always looking like he'd just stepped out of a photo shoot for a magazine about trust fund kids who thought they were entrepreneurs. But today he looked like he'd been sleeping in his car and using gas station bathrooms to brush his teeth. His hair wasn't styled. His eyes had that slightly wild look that suggested too much coffee and not enough sleep. And his whole vibe screamed, "My life is falling apart, and I don't know how to process it." I sighed, saved my work, and stood up. Might as well get this over with. Running wasn't my style, and besides, I was curious what could possibly drive Blake to show up at my office looking like a before picture in a depression medication commercial. I walked out to meet him near the reception area, away from my coworkers who were definitely watching this unfold with barely concealed interest because office drama was better than any TV show. "We need to talk," Blake said when he saw me, his voice lacking all its usual confidence and bravado. He sounded tired, defeated, like someone had finally explained to him that actions have consequences, and he was not, in fact, immune to the basic laws of cause and effect. I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms and leaning against the wall in what I hoped was a casual but clearly uninterested posture. "Shouldn't you be on your honeymoon?" I asked, because seriously, it had been like a week and a half since the wedding. Weren't newlyweds supposed to be off somewhere tropical, drinking cocktails and pretending their relationship would last forever? Blake's face did something complicated, cycling through several emotions before landing on what looked like a mixture of embarrassment and misery. "Lucy left," he said simply, those two words hanging in the air between us like a confession at a church service. I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing, because that would have been cruel even by my standards, and I was trying to maintain at least a thin veneer of human decency here. "Wow," I said, keeping my voice neutral even though internally I was doing cartwheels. "That was faster than my Amazon Prime shipping. Like, impressively fast. Did she even unpack her suitcase from the wedding, or did she just pivot directly to leaving you?" Blake flinched like I'd physically hit him, which I guess in a way I had. Words could be weapons when properly deployed, and I'd been sharpening mine for years. "Can we not do this here?" he asked, glancing around at the office workers who were absolutely not minding their own business. Gretchen had emerged from her office and was watching this interaction with undisguised fascination, probably already planning how to tell this story at the next company happy hour. "Do what?" I asked innocently. "Have a conversation? You're the one who showed up at my workplace unannounced, Blake. You set the stage for this particular performance. I'm just playing my part. The wedding was in 3 days. 3 more days until Blake's circus. 3 more days until my freedom. I was counting down like a kid before Christmas, except instead of presents under a tree, I was getting something better, the chance to finally, definitively, permanently tell my father that he no longer had any power over me. And that, my friends, was going to be better than any gift I'd ever received. When I showed up at the Rosewood estate, fashionably late by design, and carrying an envelope that felt like it weighed about 1,000 pounds despite being just paper, heads turned like I'd walked in with a live grenade strapped to my chest. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a couple of Teslas because of course there were Teslas, and one obnoxious Maserati that I knew belonged to Blake because he'd posted about 17 pictures of it on Instagram with captions about living the dream and grinding pays off. I pulled up in my sensible Subaru Outback, the kind of car that says, "I'm an adult with priorities and I don't need to compensate for anything." And I could practically feel the judgment radiating from the valet attendants who were probably wondering if I'd taken a wrong turn on my way to a camping trip. The estate itself was even more ridiculous in person than it had looked in the pictures. We're talking full-on Great Gatsby vibes, except everyone was alive and significantly less interesting than the characters in that book. There were white roses everywhere, and I mean everywhere, like someone had gone absolutely nuclear with the floral budget, and string lights hanging from trees that probably cost more to rent than my monthly mortgage payment. A fountain in the courtyard was shooting water like it was celebrating something, though I wasn't sure what. Blake's ego finally becoming visible to the naked eye? Lucy's ability to trade up for a bigger bank account? The death of my faith in humanity? Take your pick. I walked through the massive front doors, past the marble columns that screamed, "We have money and taste," but mostly money, and into the reception area where the pre-ceremony cocktail hour was in full swing. The place was packed with people I didn't know and didn't care to know, all dressed in their finest expensive clothes, holding champagne glasses and laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny but sounded sophisticated. Classical music was playing from speakers hidden somewhere in the ceiling, the kind of music that makes you feel like you should be discussing philosophy or the stock market instead of contemplating how quickly you could escape out the back door. That's when I saw her, Mom, standing near the grand staircase in a dress that probably cost more than my wedding. You know, the small, intimate ceremony she didn't know about because I didn't invite her, and her face did this thing that I can only describe as a smile, trying desperately to break through layers of Botox and social conditioning. Her eyes went wide when she spotted me, like she couldn't quite believe I'd actually shown up, like maybe she thought I'd chicken out or come to my senses and realize that subjecting myself to this circus was a form of voluntary torture. "Miles, you came." She rushed over, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer to awkwardness. Her smile was so forced I was worried her face might actually crack, and considering the amount of cosmetic work she'd clearly had done since I last saw her, that was a legitimate concern. She hugged me in that way that mothers do when they're trying to seem affectionate, but are actually just checking if you're wearing something appropriate and not planning to embarrass them. Yep, here I am, I said, returning the hug with the bare minimum effort required to not seem like a complete sociopath. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The sarcasm in my voice was thick enough to cut with a knife, but she either didn't notice or chose to ignore it, which honestly could go either way with her. Before I could extricate myself from her perfume cloud, seriously, whatever she was wearing could probably be detected from space. That appeared like a storm cloud rolling in to ruin a perfectly mediocre day. Raymond Turner, in all his stern, disapproving glory, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a glove and an expression that suggested he'd just bitten into a lemon. His eyes locked onto me with that look, the one I'd seen my entire life, the one that said, "You're disappointing me just by existing, but I'm going to pretend to be civil because we're in public." "You're late," he said. Not hello, not good to see you, not even thanks for coming. Just an immediate criticism, because that's how we do greetings in the Turner family. We skip the pleasantries and go straight for the jugular. "Traffic," I replied smoothly, though there hadn't been any traffic. "Conscience, same thing. You know how it is when you're debating whether to attend your brother's wedding to your ex-fiancée. Really makes you stop and think at every red light." I smiled, the kind of smile that looks friendly to observers, but is actually just weaponized politeness. His jaw tightened, and I could see him doing mental calculations about whether it was worth causing a scene in front of his country club buddies who were no doubt watching this interaction with the kind of fascination people reserve for car crashes and reality TV. He decided against it, which was probably the smartest decision he'd made all year. That's when I spotted Lucy across the room, standing near the bar in her bridesmaid dress. Or maybe it was her pre-wedding dress, I don't know. Weddings have like 17 different dress codes now, and I can't keep track. And our eyes met. For a second, maybe half a second, I saw something flash across her face. Guilt? Regret? Indigestion from the shrimp cocktail? Hard to say. Her eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost, except the ghost was her ex-fiancé showing up to watch her marry his brother, which is honestly more horrifying than any actual ghost could ever be. I raised my glass, which I'd grabbed from a passing waiter specifically for this moment, and gave her the most charming, threatening smile I could muster. It was the kind of smile that said, "I'm fine, everything's fine, we're all fine here," while simultaneously implying that maybe nothing was fine and chaos could erupt at any moment. Schrodinger's smile, if you will. "Relax," I mouthed across the room, making sure she could see every word. "I'm not here to object, probably." The probably was important. It left just enough uncertainty to keep things interesting, just enough doubt to make her wonder if I was going to pull some dramatic movie stunt during the speak now or forever hold your peace part. Which, for the record, I wasn't planning to do, because that would be tacky and I have some dignity left. But she didn't need to know that. Lucy's face went from pale to basically translucent, and she grabbed her champagne glass like it was a life preserver, and she was drowning in a sea of bad decisions. Good. Let her squirm a little. Let her spend the whole ceremony wondering if I was going to say something. Let her question every choice that led to this moment. I'm petty enough to enjoy that, and I'm self-aware enough to admit it. Blake was holding court near the main entrance, because of course he was. Blake never just existed in a room. He commanded attention like a B-list celebrity who thought he was A-list. He was surrounded by his groomsmen, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a cologne commercial, all sharp suits and styled hair, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences for anything. And he was laughing too loud at something that probably wasn't that funny. When he saw me, his laugh kind of stuttered, like a car engine trying to turn over, and I watched him do a literal double take. The man's confidence flickered like a faulty light bulb. But Blake being Blake, he recovered quickly, strutting over in his designer tuxedo that probably cost more than my entire wedding wardrobe, radiating that special kind of entitlement that only comes from being told you're special your entire life, without ever having to prove it. He looked like a man who'd never been told no in any meaningful way, like someone who thought the world existed to applaud his every move. His spray tan was so perfect it looked airbrushed, his hair was gelled within an inch of its life, and his smile was so white I was half expecting it to glow in the dark. "Miles, glad you could make it, bro." He went in for one of those bro hugs that guys do when they want to seem friendly but don't actually like each other. All back-patting and performative masculinity. I returned it with the enthusiasm of someone hugging a cactus. Wouldn't miss it, I said, pulling back and giving him my best shit-eating grin. It's not every day your brother marries your ex-fiancée. Real Hallmark movie material here. They'll probably make a Christmas special about it. His smile tightened just a fraction, just enough for me to know I'd landed that hit exactly where I wanted it. Hey man, water under the bridge, right? We're all adults here. Oh, absolutely. I agreed, nodding like I was the most reasonable person in the world. Super mature. Very adult. Nothing weird about this situation at all. Just a normal family gathering where everyone's made peace with the past, and definitely nobody's carrying around an envelope full of symbolic meaning. Okay, that last part might have been too specific, but I couldn't help myself. Dad started making his rounds, playing the proud patriarch, introducing Blake to various guests like he was presenting a prize stallion at a county fair. This is my son Blake, my pride and joy, he'd say, gesturing to my brother like he'd personally crafted him from marble and excellence. And every single time, my hand would shoot up from wherever I was standing in the room. And I'm the receipt they forgot to keep. I called out cheerfully, loud enough for people to hear, but casual enough to play it off as a joke. The crowd laughed, some of them genuinely, some of them nervously, all of them probably wondering what family drama they'd accidentally walked into. Dad, however, did not laugh. His face did this thing where it turned sort of purple-red, like a sunset but angrier, and I could see a vein pulsing in his temple that I was pretty sure wasn't there before. Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging in just slightly. Miles, please, she whispered urgently, her smile never wavering because appearances matter more than honesty in her world. Not here. Not today. What? I asked innocently, spreading my hands like I had no idea what she was talking about. I'm just participating in the festivities. Being present. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to be here. The moment was absolutely delicious. Better than the overpriced appetizers they were serving, better than the champagne that probably cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. This was the appetizer to my main course, the opening act to my grand finale. I was here, I was present, and I was armed with an envelope that was going to change everything. Let the games begin. I turned to walk away from the wreckage I'd just created, feeling like an action hero walking away from an explosion in slow motion. Except instead of fire and debris, it was family dysfunction and a cashier's check. My feet carried me across that ridiculously expensive marble floor with a confidence I'd never felt before in my entire life, each step echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the pre-ceremony area. It was glorious. It was liberating. It was exactly what I'd been fantasizing about for months, and somehow the reality was even better than the daydream. The weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for 25 years had just evaporated into thin air, and I felt like I could probably fly if I really put my mind to it. But of course, Dad wasn't about to let me have my triumphant exit without trying to reassert some semblance of control, because that's not how Raymond Turner operates. The man doesn't know when to quit, doesn't understand the concept of strategic retreat, doesn't recognize when he's been checkmated. His voice boomed across the room like thunder, loud enough to make several guests jump and one elderly woman clutch her chest in surprise. Get back here, Miles. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered in that tone he probably used when he was telling his employees to work overtime or demanding that a waiter comp his meal because the steak wasn't cooked exactly to his specifications. I paused, turning my head just slightly so he could see my profile, giving him the most casual glance over my shoulder like he was a stranger asking for directions and not my father having a very public meltdown. Sorry, can't, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, because if we were doing this, we were going to do it with an audience. Privacy had left the building approximately 10 minutes ago and wasn't coming back. I promised myself I wouldn't attend weddings where the groom once borrowed my Netflix password and never gave it back. Also, the whole stealing my fiancé thing. That's kind of a deal breaker too. But mostly the Netflix thing. That's just rude. The Netflix line got a few suppressed laughs from the crowd. Those little snort giggles that people make when something's funny, but they're not sure if they're allowed to laugh. Some woman in a purple dress actually had to cover her mouth to hide her smile, and I mentally sent her a thank you for appreciating my comedy in this moment of high drama. Dad's face went from angry red to apocalyptic purple, a color palette that suggested his blood pressure was probably doing things that would make a cardiologist deeply concerned. As I continued my march toward the exit, I could hear the ceremony music starting to play in the background. That soft, romantic, classical stuff that's supposed to make people feel all warm and fuzzy about love and commitment. The string quartet had switched from the ambient cocktail hour music to something more purposeful, more wedding-y, probably signaling that everyone should take their seats and prepare for the main event. It was perfect timing, really. Poetic, even. Here they were, about to begin their ceremony celebrating eternal love and partnership, and here I was, making my grand exit from their lives forever. If I'd been a movie director, I couldn't have choreographed it better. Mom had abandoned her post near the staircase and was power walking toward me in her heels, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years. Her face a mixture of panic and fury and embarrassment all rolled into one expression that would be almost impressive if it wasn't directed at me. She caught up to me near the massive front doors, her hand reaching out to grab my arm with surprising strength for someone who claimed yoga was her only form of exercise. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed, her voice low and urgent, trying to keep this between us even though approximately 50 people were watching this unfold like it was the best reality TV show they'd seen in years. I stopped, turned to face her fully, and gave her my most sincere smile, the one I usually reserve for when I was explaining environmental impact assessments to clients who didn't actually care about the environment. "Just continuing the family tradition," I said sweetly. "I learned from the best, after all. You guys have been embarrassing me my whole life. Thought I'd return the favor. Consider it my wedding gift to Blake. Something memorable, you know? Years from now, when people talk about this wedding, they won't remember the flowers or the cake or the vows. They'll remember the time his brother showed up, paid his dad back, and peaced out. That's the stuff of legend, Mom. That's the kind of story that gets told at future family gatherings, which I won't be attending, but still." Her grip tightened on my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging in just slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to make a point. "Your father is furious," she said, like this was news, like I hadn't just witnessed his face go through the entire visible light spectrum in the span of 5 minutes. "You can't just leave. What will people think?" "Oh, I don't know." I mused, pretending to consider this deeply. "Maybe they'll think that I'm a guy with self-respect who doesn't stick around to watch his brother marry his ex-fiancée. Maybe they'll think I'm someone who doesn't let family obligations trap him in toxic situations. Or maybe, and here's a wild thought, maybe I don't actually care what they think, because none of these people matter to me, and their opinions have exactly zero impact on my life." Shocking concept, I know. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "I'm leaving, Mom. You can either make a bigger scene by trying to stop me, or you can let me go and salvage what's left of your dignity. Your choice." She opened her mouth to say something else, probably something about duty or family loyalty or how I was breaking her heart. All those greatest hits that parents play when their guilt trips aren't working. But before she could launch into her monologue, I was already moving again, pushing through those massive front doors and stepping out into the afternoon sunlight that felt like freedom and vindication and the beginning of something new. The parking lot was still full of those luxury cars, still radiating wealth and status, and all those things that people pretend matter when they're trying to impress each other. I spotted my Subaru exactly where I'd left it, looking wonderfully ordinary and practical among all that automotive excess, and I'd never been happier to see a car in my entire life. But what made the moment absolutely perfect was the sight of Clara sitting in the driver's seat, engine already running, sunglasses on like she was my getaway driver in the world's most suburban heist, holding 2 iced lattes from that coffee shop we loved, the one that knew how we liked our drinks without us having to say it. She saw me coming and smiled, that beautiful smile that made me fall in love with her in the first place, the one that said, "I know exactly who you are and I love you anyway, you magnificent disaster of a human being." I opened the passenger door and slid into the seat, the familiar comfort of my own car feeling like a warm hug after being in that pretentious estate for the past hour. The air conditioning was on. The radio was playing something indie and alternative that Clara loved, and the iced latte in the cup holder had my name written on it in Sharpie with a little heart next to it. "How'd it go?" Clara asked, putting the car in reverse before I'd even fully closed the door, because she knew me well enough to know that we needed to exit stage left immediately before anyone could follow me out and try to continue the drama in the parking lot. She was already navigating us out of there with the efficiency of someone who'd planned our escape route, which, knowing Clara, she probably had. They'll be talking about it for decades, I said, buckling my seatbelt and picking up the iced latte, taking that first sip that tasted like coffee and victory and the rest of my life. Absolutely decades. I'm talking remember that time Miles showed up and burned every bridge in the vicinity, levels of memorable. I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to be 40 years old still asking permission to live my own life. Welcome to the club, I said, feeling a weird sense of camaraderie with my brother that I hadn't felt since we were kids, before competition and comparison and Dad's favoritism had turned us into strangers who shared DNA. It's a small club, currently has a membership of 2, but the benefits are excellent. Unlimited autonomy, zero guilt trips, and the constant satisfaction of knowing you're disappointing Dad just by being yourself. Can I join? Blake asked, and there was genuine hope in his voice. The club, I mean. I know we're not exactly best friends, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your friendship or whatever, but maybe we could be, I don't know, brothers who actually talk sometimes, without all the competition and the bullshit. I thought about it for a moment, weighing the past against the possibility of a different future. Blake had screwed me over, stolen my fiancée, been Dad's golden child while I was the afterthought. But he'd also just spent the last few months getting his ass thoroughly kicked by karma, and apparently he'd learned something from it. People could change, I guess. Or at least they could try. Let me think about it, I said honestly. I'm not ready to do family dinners or anything, and we're definitely not doing one of those emotional reconciliation hugs. But maybe we can text occasionally, share memes about dysfunctional families. That kind of thing. I'll take it, Blake said quickly. That's more than I deserve, honestly. Yeah, it probably is, I agreed. But I'm feeling generous lately. Success does that to people. Makes you soft. I paused. Also, if you're moving to Seattle and you need help with your resume or interview prep or whatever, I can help with that. Professional advice only. I'm not helping you move furniture or anything labor-intensive. Deal, Blake said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Thanks, Miles. Seriously. For not hanging up on me, for not telling me to go to hell, for just giving me a chance to not be a complete disaster of a human being. The bar is on the ground with you, Blake, I said. But hey, at least you're finally trying to step over it instead of just lying down next to it. We talked for a few more minutes about his new job, about Seattle, about nothing particularly important, but everything that mattered. When we hung up, I sat there for a moment processing the conversation, trying to figure out how I felt about this new development in the Blake situation. Clara came home from her yoga class, all zen and flexible, and found me staring at my phone with a confused expression. What's wrong? She asked, dropping her yoga mat by the door and coming over to the couch. You look like you just got news that the earth is actually flat and everything you know is a lie. Blake called, I said. He's moving to Seattle, getting a real job, apparently having some kind of quarter-life crisis that's resulted in actual personal growth. It's deeply unsettling. I don't know how to feel about it. Clara sat down next to me, tucking her legs under her in that way she did. Do you want to feel something about it? Or can you just let it be what it is, your brother trying to get his life together without needing you to have feelings about it? That's very zen of you, I said. Did your yoga instructor tell you that? Because it sounds like something a yoga instructor would say. Very wise and detached. I'm serious, she said, poking my arm. You don't have to figure out your relationship with Blake right now. You don't have to forgive him or be his best friend or anything. You can just let him do his thing while you do yours. Maybe someday you'll be closer. Maybe you won't. Either way is fine. When did you get so wise? I asked, pulling her closer. I've always been wise, she replied. You're just finally smart enough to notice. Meanwhile, in what can only be described as the universe's sense of poetic justice reaching its final form, Dad's business had started having some serious problems. I heard about it through Mom, who'd apparently decided we were on speaking terms now that I was successful enough to mention at her book club, and through some industry contacts who liked to gossip. Turns out Dad had borrowed a significant amount of money from Blake's new father-in-law. Well, former father-in-law now since the annulment, for wedding expenses, which, in retrospect, seemed like a terrible financial decision, But then again, Dad had never been great at thinking through consequences. The thing about borrowing money from someone whose daughter you were welcoming into the family is that it gets really awkward when said daughter annuls the marriage after discovering her husband was cheating. Blake's ex-father-in-law was apparently the kind of rich guy who took business very personally and personal matters very business-ly, if that makes sense. He wanted his money back, immediately, with interest, and he didn't particularly care that Dad's commercial real estate investments had taken a hit during the market downturn. Mom called me about it one evening, her voice shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "Miles, your father's business is in trouble. He's talking about having to sell the boat, maybe downsize the house. He's been so stressed," and I thought maybe. "Let me stop you right there," I interrupted, already knowing where this was going and wanting to head it off at the pass before we ventured into uncomfortable territory. "If you're about to ask me for money, the answer is no. Hard no. Absolutely not happening. Not even a little bit." "Miles, he's your father," she started, pulling out the family card like it was some kind of trump suit in a card game I'd already folded on. "He's a grown man who made bad financial decisions," I said firmly but not unkindly, because I'd had enough therapy by tacos with Clara to know how to set boundaries without being a complete jerk about it. "He borrowed money he couldn't pay back, probably to impress people who don't actually care about him, for a wedding that ended in an annulment before the honeymoon tint faded. Those are consequences, Mom. Natural, logical consequences of his choices. I'm not swooping in to save him from them. But we're family." "Family works both ways," I interrupted again, because this conversation needed to end before it went somewhere we couldn't come back from. "He didn't support me when I needed it. Emotionally, I mean, not financially. Since we've established he basically contributed one semester's worth of tuition and held it over my head for years. So no, I'm not bailing him out of his self-created crisis. My schedule's packed with not being manipulated and living my actual life." There was silence on the other end, and I could hear her processing this, could practically see her face doing that thing where she tried to figure out which approach would work. Guilt, anger, sadness, some combination of all three. But before she could launch into another angle, I softened my voice slightly. "Mom, I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm doing this because Dad needs to figure out his own life without using other people as safety nets. Just like I had to. Just like Blake's doing now. It's not punishment. It's just reality." She hung up shortly after that, probably disappointed, probably thinking I was heartless. But I felt fine about it. More than fine, actually. I felt clear, certain, like I'd finally figured out where my responsibilities ended and other people's began. That's growth, baby. That's emotional maturity. That's what happens when you stop letting people guilt you into solving problems they created for themselves. Instead of dwelling on it, I focused on what actually mattered. My work with the city project was moving forward. Clara and I were planning a weekend trip to the coast, and I'd just gotten a message from a recruiter about a speaking opportunity at an environmental engineering conference. Life was good. Life was really, really good. And the best part? I'd built it myself, without permission, without approval, without anyone's blessing but my own. A year later, a full year of living my own life, making my own choices, and generally thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible back when I was still under Dad's thumb, I got promoted to project manager at Thornway Environmental Systems. This wasn't just some lateral move with a fancier title and a marginal pay bump. This was the real deal, a legitimate promotion with actual authority, a team of engineers reporting to me, and the kind of responsibility that Dad once said I'd never be disciplined enough for. Those were his exact words, delivered over a dinner table when I was 22 and trying to explain my career goals while he dismissed them like I was a child explaining how I wanted to be an astronaut cowboy president. The promotion came with a ceremony, because apparently Thornway believed in actually celebrating people's achievements instead of just expecting them to work harder for the same level of recognition. Gretchen had organized the whole thing. Nothing too fancy, just a gathering in the main conference room with the whole company. Some catered food that was significantly better than the usual office lunch options, and speeches from the senior partners about innovation and dedication, and all those corporate buzzwords that actually meant something when they were attached to real accomplishments. I invited my parents out of courtesy, not out of any deep need for their presence or approval. It was one of those gestures you make when you're secure enough in yourself that their attendance or absence doesn't actually affect your happiness. Clara thought it was a good idea, said it might give them a chance to see what I'd built without them, and I trusted her judgment on emotional matters way more than I trusted my own. So I sent them an invitation, formal, professional, no guilt trips or expectations attached, and left it at that. They came. Both of them. Mom in one of her expensive dresses that probably cost more than my first month's rent out of college, and Dad in a suit that looked like he'd lost weight, stress weight probably, the kind that comes from financial problems and pride taking simultaneous hits. They sat in the back of the conference room, quiet and awkward, like guests at a party where they didn't really know anyone and weren't sure they should have shown up. It was weird seeing them in my professional space, in this world I'd built entirely without their input or interference. Like two characters from one TV show making a cameo appearance in a completely different series. During the ceremony, my boss, the senior partner who'd been with Thornway for 25 years and had the kind of reputation that made people actually listen when he talked, gave a speech that made me simultaneously proud and uncomfortable with being the center of attention. Miles Turner came to us fresh out of school with a degree, a brain full of knowledge, and a work ethic that honestly made the rest of us look bad, he said, getting some laughs from the crowd. But more than that, he came with integrity, with the kind of character that you can't teach in any classroom or learn from any textbook. He continued, and I tried not to squirm in my seat at the front of the room. Miles Turner, valedictorian of his graduating class. Yes, we looked that up. Environmental engineer, and the kind of person who can turn any obstacle into innovation. He doesn't just solve problems. He reimagines entire systems. He doesn't just follow the rules. He questions whether the rules actually make sense and proposes better ones. And that's exactly the kind of thinking we need leading our projects into the future. The applause that followed was genuine, warm, the kind that makes you feel simultaneously grateful and like you want to hide under a table. I caught Clara's eye from where she sat in the third row, and she was beaming at me like I'd just won an Olympic medal instead of just getting promoted at work. That smile alone made the whole awkward ceremony worth it. Afterward, once the formal part was over and people were mingling with plates of fancy finger foods and congratulating me with handshakes and backpats, Dad approached me. He moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Mom stayed a few steps behind him, her usual confidence replaced with something uncertain and sad. "Miles," Dad said, and his voice was different from how I remembered it. Quieter, less commanding, stripped of that authoritative boom that used to make me feel about 3 inches tall. "I didn't realize how far you've come. That speech, what your boss said about you." "Yeah, well," I said, not quite ready to make this easy for him, but not interested in being cruel either. "It's amazing what happens when people stop holding you back. When you stop measuring yourself against someone else's expectations and start building something that actually matters to you. Funny how that works." He nodded slowly, absorbing the hit because he knew he'd earned it. "I was wrong," he said, and those 3 words coming from Raymond Turner felt like witnessing a solar eclipse. Rare, momentous, slightly unbelievable. "About you. About what you could accomplish. About a lot of things. I didn't see you clearly. I don't know if I ever did." "No," I agreed, because honesty seemed more valuable than politeness at this point. "You didn't. You saw what you wanted me to be, or what you thought I should be, or maybe just a version of yourself that you could control. But you never really saw me. The actual me. For the first time maybe ever." He looked at me like I was a person instead of a project or a disappointment or an extension of himself. "I'm seeing you now," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry I had to read about your accomplishments in the newspaper instead of hearing about them from you. That's on me. That's my failure, not yours." It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever gotten from him, and part of me, the part that was still that kid desperately seeking his father's approval, wanted to accept it immediately, to bridge the gap, to pretend like everything could be fixed with one conversation. But the larger part of me, the part that had spent the last year growing into someone I actually liked and respected, knew better. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully, choosing my words like I was navigating a minefield. "I do. But Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for your approval anymore. I'm not achieving things so you'll finally be proud of me. I'm doing this because it matters to me, because I'm good at it, because I want to make a difference in the world in my own way. Your opinion of me, it doesn't define my worth anymore. It can't. I won't let it." He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe argue, maybe apologize again. But before he could, Gretchen swooped in with her impeccable timing and dragged me away to meet some potential clients who wanted to discuss a new project. I gave Dad a nod, a small acknowledgement that we'd had a moment even if that moment didn't fix everything. And then I was pulled back into my actual life, the one that existed independent of family drama. Later that evening, after the ceremony was over and we'd escaped back to our house, Clara and I sat on our back porch with a bottle of champagne that we'd been saving for a special occasion. The Portland evening was perfect, cool but not cold, clear sky full of stars, the kind of night that makes you grateful to be alive and exactly where you are. "You okay?" Clara asked, pouring us both generous glasses because we'd earned it. "That thing with your dad seemed intense." "Better than okay," I said, meaning it completely. I finally graduated from caring about their approval. Like, truly graduated. Not just saying I don't care, but actually, genuinely not caring whether they're proud of me or not. Because I'm proud of me. You're proud of me. The people whose opinions actually matter are proud of me. And that's enough. That's more than enough. She raised her glass, and I raised mine to meet it. To 6 figures, low stress, and family drama we can laugh about later, she toasted, echoing something I'd said a year ago that felt like a lifetime ago now. And to envelopes, I added with a grin, remembering that white rectangle of freedom that had started this whole journey. The quietest bombs ever invented. We clinked glasses and drank, and the champagne tasted like victory and freedom and the rest of my life stretching out ahead of me, full of possibilities that I got to choose for myself. In the distance, the city lights of Portland glowed against the darkening sky, and somewhere in that city was a water treatment project with my name on it, a team of engineers who respected me, and a future I'd built entirely on my own terms. Blake texted me later that night. "Heard about the promotion. Congrats, man. You earned it." I texted back. "Thanks. How's Seattle?" "Rainy. But good. Really good, actually." "Good," I replied, and I meant it. We weren't close, probably never would be, but we were something. Brothers who'd both escaped the same gravitational pull and found our own orbits. That was enough. I put my phone down and looked at Clara, who was scrolling through her own phone and laughing at something. "What's funny?" I asked. "Your mom just sent me a friend request on Facebook," she said, showing me the screen. "Should I accept it?" "Only if you want monthly messages about family gatherings we're not attending and passive-aggressive comments about how we never visit," I said. "But yeah, accept it. We can afford to be generous now. We won the game, Clara. We actually won." "We did, didn't we?" she said, setting her phone aside and curling up against me. "So what's next, Mr. Project Manager? What's the next big goal?" I thought about it for a moment, looking up at the stars and feeling more content than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Honestly, nothing big. Just this. Living our life, doing good work, being happy. Maybe adopting a dog at some point. I don't need any more dramatic goals or grand gestures or schemes to prove anything to anyone. I just want to keep doing what we're doing. "A dog." Clara perked up. "You never mentioned wanting a dog." "I'm mentioning it now. A big one. Maybe a rescue. Something that appreciates being given a second chance." "That's very on-brand for you," she laughed. "Projecting your family issues onto a hypothetical dog." "It's called therapy," I corrected. "Very healthy. Very well-adjusted." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars and drinking champagne and being exactly who we were without apology or explanation. And I realized that this quiet, content, drama-free existence was what success actually looked like. Not the promotion, not the newspaper articles, not even the moment I handed Dad that check and walked away. Just this, being happy with someone who loved you, doing work that mattered, and finally being free.